Chapter 536. The Kingdom of Qi was located in the southwest and was an inconspicuous country among the countries in the Central Plains. Naturally, its capital city could not be compared to Chang'an. It was not magnificent, but it was exceptionally clean and quiet. Under the yellowish ginkgo leaves, pedestrians weaved in and out. They looked calm or numb, as if the beautiful scenery on the street and the daily life stories around them could not affect them at all. For thousands of years, the Kingdom of Qi had been a vassal of the divine halls of West Hill. Haotian Taoism enjoyed a high status here. Carriages bearing the emblem of the divine halls would occasionally pass through the streets, and the people would kneel by the roadside devoutly. There was a white Taoist temple in the north of the capital. The exterior of the building was inlaid with various gems, and the edges of the rain path were painted with gold powder. It was obviously modeled after the divine halls of West Hill on Peach Mountain, but much smaller. The height of this Taoist temple was even higher than the imperial palace of the Kingdom of Qi in the center of the capital. Standing on top of the Taoist temple and looking at the imperial palace from afar, one would naturally feel as if they were looking down from above. This difference in height was a deliberate arrangement, and it was also the true portrayal of the situation for thousands of years. The succession of the Qi kingdom's throne had to be approved by the Divine Hall. Regardless of military or diplomatic affairs, the Divine Hall's influence could not be shaken off. Therefore, one could imagine how powerful the Divine Hall was here. The red-robed priest who lived in the Taoist hall had a status even vaguely higher than the emperor in Qi Kingdom. With power came endless wealth and resources. All the citizens of the Kingdom of Qi knew that the most dazzling jewels and the rarest items in the Taoist temple were not in the imperial palace, but in the Taoist temple. Wealth was always tempting. Even the most daring and powerful robbers would not dare to steal from the Taoist temple. No robber would be stupid enough to rob here, because this Taoist temple was the most heavily guarded place in the Kingdom of Qi. No one dared to easily offend it in Haotian's world. Just a few days ago, something major happened in the Kingdom of Qi. The Celestial Master Taoism of Longhu Mountain was massacred, and the National Master, Celestial Master Zhang, died horribly. The Divine Halls and the royal family of the Kingdom of Qi jointly sent a large number of people to investigate. However, the atmosphere in the capital was still as gloomy as autumn. The security in the Taoist temple grew tighter. The knights standing on both sides of the stone steps stared coldly at the passers-by. Their eyes were as cold as ice, as if everyone was a thief in their eyes. On the quiet street, an ear-piercing and unpleasant sound of friction suddenly rang out. The knights immediately became alert and looked in that direction. Their indifferent eyes were suddenly filled with disbelief. A black carriage was slowly moving along the street. The black wheels of the carriage rolled over the hard stone road, leaving behind a deep mark. Broken stone chips flew in all directions. The knights were shocked speechless. They wondered how heavy the black carriage was to create such an effect. Also, what material were the wheels of the carriage made of? How could they not be deformed? What was even more difficult for them to understand was that although there was a tall black horse in front of the black carriage, it was not pulled by the horse. Instead, there was an extremely thick rope tied to the front of the carriage, which was pulled by a young man. How strong did this young man have to be to pull such a heavy carriage? This matter was immediately reported to the Taoist temple. A middle-aged divine priest came out to have a look. When he saw this scene, his face became a little gloomy and a little complicated. A person who could pull this carriage with one hand was certainly not an ordinary person. Although he was vigilant, he did not want to cause any trouble. The black carriage slowly moved up the ramp and stopped in front of the Taoist temple. The big black horse lowered its head and panted heavily. It looked extremely tired. Some of the knights who were good horses looked at its smooth fur and could not help but feel sorry for it. They thought that the young man was really bad for raising such a divine horse into a sick one. "What are you doing here?" The middle-aged divine priest looked at the young man and asked with a slight frown. As a member of the West Hill Divine Palace, he carried out decrees on behalf of Haotian in the world. He was used to living a high and mighty life in the capital of the Kingdom of Qi. Naturally, he was arrogant and cold. He thought that his question was very gentle, but he did not know how rude it was to others. The young man was, of course, Ning Quebec. If it had been in the past, he would not have been able to accept the West Hill Divine Palace priests he hated the most speaking to him in the most detestable tone. However, he had come to this Taoist hall for other matters. Moreover, after the battle at the Red Lotus Temple, his temperament had strangely become much quieter. My wife is seriously ill. I heard that the Taoist temple can cure her, so, Ning Ke said. Only then did the middle-aged divine priest realize that the young man had come to seek medical advice. He could not help but frown and was about to reprimand him. However, he recalled the scene of the black carriage rolling over the stone path and suppressed his impatience. He waved his hand and said, "It's not time to put the medicine yet. Come back in 3 days." Billions of people in the world were believers of Haotian. The West Hill Divine Palace had to maintain its rule. In addition to its divine power, it naturally had to give its divine grace at the right time. The will of Haotian could not be sensed by ordinary people. There were very few divine priests who cultivated in the divine skill, and they could not really cure believers in the world. However, the Taoist temples of each country stored many medicinal herbs and even many rare elixirs. They would provide them to believers for free every once in a while. Of course, no religion would do business at a loss. The West Hill Divine Palace was no exception. Therefore, the Taoist temples of each country strictly controlled the time interval when they put the medicine. They gave believers hope and held it tightly in their hands. We don't need the divine priests in the Taoist temple to treat us. We just heard that the Taoist temples of each country stored the most medicinal herbs, so we came to take a look. Of course, we will still pay for the medicine. Ning Ke said and then took out a banknote and handed it over. The middle-aged divine priest was slightly stunned and thought angrily. The medicinal herbs and elixirs in the Taoist temple were all carefully developed by the predecessors of the West Hill Divine Palace. How could they be compared to ordinary prescriptions in the world? How could this man buy them with money? It was an insult to the divine hall. Suddenly, from the corner of his eyes, he saw the number on the banknote and couldn't help but tremble. He thought that if this was an insult, let alone him, even the esteemed red-clothed priest wouldn't mind being insulted a few more times. The middle-aged divine priest's good mood did not last long. When he opened the door and mercifully allowed Ning Ke to pull the black carriage and the black horse through the side door of the Taoist temple, he received a second piece of paper from Ning Quebec. This thin piece of paper was not a banknote, but a list. The list was densely packed with words. There were at least 30 kinds of precious medicinal herbs and elixirs, and a large number of them were the secret treasures of the Taoist temple and were forbidden to be spread to the outside world. The middle-aged divine priest did not know how this young man knew that these medicinal herbs were hidden in the Taoist temple. He could not help but be shocked. Even so, he noticed that the handwriting on the list was beautiful and beautiful. It was a rare handwriting. He took a look at the list and then at the banknote. He said with regret and vigilance, "Although I can feel your sincerity to Haotian, I'm sorry to tell you that many of the medicinal herbs on the list cannot be bought with money. No matter how much sincerity you show, it will be meaningless." Ning Ke looked at the medicine warehouse not far away. At this moment, the sound of sang-sang coughing came from the black carriage. He could not help but frown slightly, and his eyes began to fill with irritation. After leaving the Green Mountain Red Lotus Temple yesterday evening, he did not continue to the Lang Temple. Although the carriage had been repaired, it would take him at least 10 days to reach the Lang Temple with his walking speed. Sang-sang had been in a coma. The poison and the pain had made her face abnormally pale. Under such circumstances, he could only choose the nearest big city and then find the medicinal herbs he needed. Before leaving Chang'an, the 11th brother of the academy, Wang Qi, had left him more than a dozen prescriptions. However, these prescriptions looked ordinary, but some of the herbs could only be found in the back of the mountain of the academy. They were hard to find in the world, no matter if it was a prescription to suppress the cold aura or a prescription to detoxify. Other than the academy, the Taoist temple had the most rare medicinal herbs. Therefore, Ning Ke decided to go to the nearest capital of the Kingdom of Qi. From yesterday evening until now, he had led the big black horse in one hand and dragged the heavy carriage with the other. He did not sleep, rest, drink or eat, and trudged on the muddy road after the rain. He had actually made it to the capital. One could imagine how much effort and price he had paid. The only thing that could comfort him was that Sang Sang finally woke up in the early morning. Although her coughing became worse and showed no signs of getting better, at least he was relieved. At this time, Ning Ke seemed to be fine, but in fact, his physical strength had been exhausted. His mind was a little dazed because of excessive tension and fatigue. He had almost forgotten everything. He forgot that he was going to the Lank Temple to participate in the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. He forgot that he had just fought with Prince Long Qing and the Fallen Knight. He forgot that he had entered the Knowing Destiny state. He only remembered that he had to find the medicinal herbs for Sang Sang. However, just when he was about to get the medicinal herbs, something else happened. Ning Ke was still silent, but the emotions in his eyes became colder and colder. In the depths of coldness, there was a terrifying manic emotion. His hand slowly grasped the hilt of his knife. Seeing this, the middle-aged divine priest's face suddenly became extremely ugly. He could accept this young man insulting him with silver notes, but he could not accept the young man threatening him with violence. He was a divine priest serving Haotian. Anyone who threatened him with violence was threatening Haotian. Daring to threaten Haotian was blasphemy. In the Taoist temple, the papal knights who had been silently guarding at the side slowly pulled out their swords from their sheaths. The Taoists with cultivation states began to silently mobilize their psyche power. In their eyes, even if this young man had terrifying power, he would be killed if he dared to pull out his knife from its sheath. Coughing sounds came from the black horse carriage again. It seemed that the person was in extreme pain. Ning Ke's body trembled slightly. He woke up from the frenzied emotions and looked worriedly at the window. A thin arm stretched out from the window and gently wiped the beads of sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. A weak and pitiful voice came from the carriage. "I'm so tired. Get in the carriage." Ning Ke could fall asleep with his eyes closed. He was indeed extremely tired, but he could not forget the purpose of his trip. He said, "I want to find some medicines." Sang Sang's weak voice sounded again. She said, "Have you forgotten who I am? If I asked them for some medicines, they would be too embarrassed to refuse. I was supposed to fly to Chengdu today, but I said yesterday that I cancelled it in order to go home earlier to write more words and work harder. But I received a call from 72 in the afternoon, asking when I would arrive and if he could pick me up at the airport for a drink. I said I would not come, I would go home to grab the monthly ticket." He was silent on the phone for a moment, and then he laughed wildly. Finally, he said that the monthly ticket was not something you could grab if you wanted to. Then I said that when I got home, I would prove it to everyone. I'm a guy who doesn't grab anything, but once I grab something, it's amazing. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 537. Ning Ke sobered up a little when he heard Sang Sang's tired voice. He loosened his grip on the hilt of his padao and reached for his waist. He was a Tang from the academy, so he had no good feelings for these fakes from the West Hill Divine Palace. Moreover, Sang Sang was extremely worried and emotionally unstable. However, there was no need to start a war between the Divine Hall and the academy if he could avoid using force. Just as he was about to take his hand out from his waist, an old voice rang out from the depths of the temple. "Mr. 13, you don't have to take it. This is not the wilderness, and I am not Qinglishue." As the aged voice sounded, the expressions of the middle-aged priest and the knights immediately became serious. A moment later, an elderly priest wearing a crimson divine robe slowly walked out. Not all Taoists in the West Hill Divine Palace were qualified to wear crimson robes, especially the red-robed priests who were stationed in various vassal states. They had a status that their peers in the Divine Hall could not reach. This old red-robed priest had been stationed in the kingdom of Qi for more than 30 years. Even though he did not have a strong background in the West Hill Divine Palace, even the emperor of the kingdom of Qi had to show him enough respect. Looking at the black horse carriage and Ning Kai beside it, the red-robed divine priest's cloudy eyes were filled with vigilance. He thought that this person had already left the Tang Empire's diplomatic corps and went straight to the Lang Temple. Why would he appear here today? Hearing the name, Mr. 13, the previously vigilant and cold knights finally knew the identity of the young man beside the black horse carriage. They could not help but feel extremely conflicted. The Tang Empire was the most powerful country in the world, and the only world that the West Hill Divine Palace could not control. The Academy and Haotian Taoism had always been enemies. There had been many earth-shattering battles that mortals did not know about, but they had never fallen out with each other. The respected red-robed priest could not be arrogant in front of a disciple of the second floor of the academy, but he would not show any fear either. Under the protection of the West Hill Divine Palace, vassal states like the Song and Qi kingdoms had never experienced the horrors of the Tang cavalry, so they were not afraid. Therefore, the rest of the people in the temple were relatively calm. Looking at the priest in red, Ning Kai said, "Since you know who I am and you don't want those things to happen in the wilderness, I think we can negotiate. I just need some medicinal herbs from you, and I'm willing to pay for them. I just need you to hurry up." The red-robed divine priest took the list from the middle-aged subordinate. He frowned and said, "The academy is indeed worthy of respect, but the Taoism Hall is a place to worship Haotian." Ning Kai could tell that the man was rejecting him. His anxiety and frenzied emotions rose again. He leaned forward slightly and listened to the man's old eyes. He said, "If it was in the past, I would definitely force you to find Yi Hongyu and then humiliate you in front of her. But now I am very anxious, so I beg you to take a good look at the waist token in my hand." He took out a token from his belt and raised it in front of the priest. The distance was so close that it looked like he had smashed it on the priest's wrinkled face. The priest in red heard Yi Hongyu's name. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't figure it out. He had lived in Haotian Taoism all his life. Except for the first few years, he had never heard anyone call her by her name. After a while, he came to his senses and glared at Ning Quebec. Even if Ning Kai was a core disciple of the headmaster of academy, it was unacceptable for him to call the great divine priest of judgment by her name. However, when his furious gaze came into contact with the waist token, it immediately froze. Looking at the ordinary-looking waist token, the priest in red's old eyes were filled with shock. He thought of the rumor he had heard when he returned to the Divine Hall last year. He thought of the little handmaiden beside Ning Quebec. His body began to tremble uncontrollably, and every wrinkle on his face turned pale. He suddenly felt that he was really old. He had forgotten so many important things. Since Mr. 13 of the academy was in front of him, how could that person not be here? Being old and muddle-headed meant being muddle-headed. If he was as muddle-headed as himself, how could he continue to be the red-robed divine priest? When he returned to the West Hill this year, if Commander Luo still refused to let go, then he would comply. However, so what if he was old and muddle-headed? After 16 years, he finally saw this waist token again. The great divine priest that had been empty for 16 years finally shone again. Everything was enough. The old red-robed divine priest thought of many things in a very short time after seeing the waist token. Then, he turned to look at the black horse carriage and slowly knelt down. Seeing this scene, there was a burst of exclamation in the quiet Taoist hall. Ning Kai was not surprised. He had many waist tokens in his belt. However, people in the world could only remember some of them and often forget others. However, what happened next still made him feel a little strange. That red-clothed priest knelt in front of the black carriage, both of his palms landing on the slightly rough stone floor. His grizzled hair trembled slightly as he muttered something. There was no longer the slightest trace of shock or alarm in his eyes, only endless sentimental remembrance, as well as incomparably pious excitement and agitation. The people present still did not understand what had happened. They did not know who was sitting in the black horse carriage. Even if the great divine priest of West Hill had come in person, the red-robed divine priest would not have made such a big bow. Only the middle-aged divine priest vaguely guessed the truth of the matter. As the red-robed divine priest's most trusted subordinate, he had seen the red-robed divine priest's ecstatic drunkenness many nights after he returned from the West Hill Divine Palace last year. He had heard something intermittently. Therefore, he knelt down behind the red-robed divine priest without hesitation. The middle-aged divine priest kowtowed heavily to the black horse carriage. Then, with endless fear or awe, he said in a trembling voice, "Welcome, Lady of Light, to the kingdom of the human world." The 4 words, Lady of Light, floated slowly in the building and disappeared without a trace before hitting the wall. However, it continued to sound like thunder in the ears of the people. Only the dense sounds of cloth rubbing, knees hitting the ground, and heavy kowtows could be heard in the quiet white Taoist hall. Whether people were standing on the stone steps or reading scriptures, after hearing the middle-aged divine priest's trembling words, they all knelt down as fast as they could. They worshipped the black horse carriage in awe and did not dare to say a word. After a long time, Sung Sung's slightly tired voice sounded from the black horse carriage, "Get up, all of you." No one got up, because the most respected red-robed divine priest was still kneeling in front of the black horse carriage. From the moment he heard the voice, turbid tears began to flow down his old face. His deep wrinkles were immediately wet, like the cracked earth that had been dry for countless years finally welcoming the spring rain. His face was covered with tears, and his body trembled. He was so happy that he forgot to stand up. Let me say this, because Mo Yen won the award, I was really happy for a long time, and then delayed some time. Okay, I was mainly packing my luggage and chatting with my parents, so I didn't write much. Tomorrow, I will have to fly for another day. I have to repeat this countless times. The motherland is really King big. I will leave at 8 a.m. in the morning and try to write some on the plane or at the airport when I have a transfer, and then I will only get home after 9 p.m. If I really can't write anymore, then I will change my leave from the Saturday the day after tomorrow to tomorrow and report to everyone. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 538. Last spring, the great divine priest of light left his most important things to Sang Sang before he fought with Master Yen Sei under the pine tree at the top of a nameless mountain in the north of Chang'an. Yen Sei left the array I pestle of the god-stunning array and asked Sang Sang to give it to Ning Quebec. The great divine priest of light left an ID token for Sang Sang. From that day on, Sang Sang was no longer Ning K's little handmaiden or the miss in distress of the Grand Secretary's mansion. She had a very special identity. Because of this identity, the great divine priest of revelation specially came to Chang'an from the West Hill to meet Ning K and made a 3-year appointment with him. And because of this identity, everyone in the Taoism temple in the capital of the kingdom of Qi knelt before the black horse carriage. Ning K didn't know until today that Sang Sang had the official title of the Lady of Light in the West Hill Divine Palace. Although he didn't like it subconsciously, he could tell that this title was extremely honorable. Looking at the priests and knights kneeling on the ground, looking at the red-robed priest in front of him who was in tears, and feeling the solemn atmosphere, he was a little confused to find that his little handmaiden was already a bigwig. In the evening, 2 figures appeared on the highest floor of the White Taoism temple in the capital of the kingdom of Qi. The golden sunlight shrouded the place, and the ginkgo leaves on the street formed a beautiful contrast. Ning K quietly looked at the foreign autumn. Suddenly, he turned around and looked at the old and tired face of the red-robed priest. He said, "Do you know what it means to let a great divine priest of light die in your Taoism temple? Although she isn't now, everyone in Haotian Taoism knows that she will be in 3 years." Looking at him, the red-robed priest's cloudy eyes revealed a very complicated emotion. He was a little grateful and a little angry. He said, "Mr. 13, I think you should understand one thing. No one cares more about the safety of the Lady of Light than the West Hill Divine Palace. As for me, I will do my best. Otherwise, I would rather die." Ning Ke didn't know what to say when he heard this answer. Even he couldn't find any fault with the old priest's actions in the past half a day. Relying on the supreme power of the West Hill Divine Palace in its vassal states, the red-robed divine priest mobilized the entire Taoism temple and the imperial court of the Kingdom of Qi to kidnap the most famous doctors in the capital and bring them back to the Taoism temple to treat Sang Sang in a short period of time. As for the antidote that Ning Ke had left for 11th brother, he had already prepared 2 of them forcibly from the imperial palace of the Kingdom of Qi. After taking the medicine, most of the toxins in Sang Sang's body had been eliminated. She was obviously getting better. Although she was still unconscious most of the time, at least her life was not in danger. The poison in the divine throne is very peculiar. Mr. 13, although your prescription is extremely brilliant, it obviously can't be completely eradicated. We still need to think of other methods. As for the Yin energy in the divine throne, I can't. When the red-robed divine priest mentioned Sang Sang, he didn't use the official title of Lady of Light for Sang Sang in the West Hill Divine Palace. Instead, he called her the Divine Throne, as if he was certain that Sang Sang would inherit the Divine Throne of Light. Speaking of this, the old priest looked at Ning Ke coldly and said with endless anger, "The Divine Throne's health is so important. How did the Academy take care of her?" Most people in Haotian Taoism thought that Sang Sang stayed in Chang and to receive the Academy's meticulous care and education. However, the truth was that Sang Sang not only had to continue taking care of Ning Ke's food and clothing, but also often had to cook for the lazy people in the Academy. Ning Ke could imagine that if the people in the West Hill Divine Palace knew that the great divine priest, who was incomparably noble in their hearts, was living such a life, they would definitely go crazy with anger. Therefore, in the face of the red-robed divine priest's anger, he very rationally remained silent. However, he couldn't help but feel a little confused when he thought of the man crying in front of the black horse carriage and his subsequent behavior. He looked at the old eyes of the red-robed divine priest and asked, "Which department are you from?" The red-robed divine priest said calmly and proudly, "I am from the Divine Hall of Light." Ning Ke vaguely understood something and suddenly asked, "Do you know my relationship with her?" The red-robed divine priest said with a complicated expression, "The great divine priest and Mr. 13 are master and servant in name, but they are actually partners." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "Wrong." The red-robed divine priest's expression turned slightly serious and he asked, "What's wrong?" Ning Ke said, "We were engaged before we left Chang'an, so we are husband and wife now." Congratulations. Even though he said so, there was no joy on the red-robed divine priest's face. He looked extremely numb, and even disappointment and pain could be seen in his eyes. There were stories of the great divine priest of West Hill marrying someone in the secular world in history, but that was extremely rare, especially for the great divine priest of light, who was regarded as the closest to Haotian. He had served Haotian wholeheartedly for hundreds of years, so how could he get married? And it was with someone outside of the West Hill. The future great divine priest of light of West Hill had been tricked into becoming the wife of a shameless disciple of the Academy many years in advance. For the people of West Hill, especially in the Divine Hall of Light, it was undoubtedly extremely difficult to accept. However, the great divine priest of revelation had agreed to Ning Ke's conditions in Chang'an, so they could not object. Ning Ke could see the old man's disappointment, pain, and hatred towards him, so he was naturally not afraid. However, he still felt that it was a little troublesome when he thought about the future. He said, "Sang Sang is my wife, and no one can change that. The great divine priest of revelation has agreed to marry me, which means that he has obtained Haotian's permission. In that case, you and your companions should think clearly. In the future, at least half of the Divine Hall of Light of West Hill will be mine, so don't be hostile to me." This was not a threat. He was very clear that no matter whether it was the old and cunning swindlers in the West Hill Divine Palace or the passionate believers in Haotian Taoism, they would not bow down in the face of such a threat. He only said these words to remind the red-robed divine priest of something and tried to close the psychological distance between them. However, he did not expect that after hearing these words, the red-robed divine priest did not sneer or get angry. Instead, he began to seriously think about it, and the disappointment and pain in his eyes gradually calmed down. After a long time, the red-robed divine priest looked at Ning Ke and said calmly, "I agree with you." The red-robed divine priest looked at Ning Quebec. "In the future, there should be a seat for you in the divine hall of light. If the great divine priest is willing, he can even give you half of the divine hall of light. What's the big deal?" So it was Ning Ke's turn to frown and think. After all, no matter what his relationship with Sang Sang was, the West Hill Divine Palace would not allow the Academy to openly extend their hands into Peach Mountain, let alone directly affecting the Divine Hall of Light. Then why would the red-robed divine priest make such an invitation? He could not come to any conclusion. He looked at the red-robed divine priest and asked directly, "Why?" The great divine priest is still the Lady of Light, young and pure. The West Hill Divine Palace is the most complicated and dangerous place in the world. Even if she appears in Peach Mountain 2 years later, as the great divine priest of Revelation said, she still might not be able to sit in the divine hall of light. Fortunately or unfortunately, you are her husband. If the Academy is willing to support the great divine priest through you, then I think her path to the throne will be smoother and more peaceful. The red-robed divine priest lowered his head slightly and showed respect to Ning Ke for the first time in the conversation. Ning Ke was silent. He suddenly realized that as Sang Sang's status grew, the problems or challenges they faced seemed to become more and more troublesome and complicated. However, these problems could only be faced in the future. Sang Sang was still in a coma and was seriously ill. He had to consider her current health, not her future glory. So he did not continue to discuss this problem. He asked, "When will Yi Hongyu arrive?" The old red-robed divine priest had protested many times when Mr. 13 of the Academy insisted on calling the great divine priest of judgment by her name. However, his protests were always in an awkward position. Thinking of the relationship between Ning Ke and the great divine priest of light, he was afraid that Ning Ke had done even more disrespectful things. So he had to give up the dignity of Haotian Taoism in this aspect. If the great divine priest of judgment comes from the West Hill, it will take at least 10 days. After Sang Sang fell asleep again, Ning Ke ate something and washed up. He recovered some energy and was no longer as tired and absent-minded as when he first arrived at the capital. His thoughts were very clear. She can't be in the West Hill now. Because she should know how troublesome this matter is. Even if the entire Haotian Taoism could not guess Long Qing's appearance, she must have guessed it. So she is looking for him. From Dragon Tiger Mountain to the martial arts sect, and then to the Red Lotus Temple yesterday, she should be on this route. Then he looked at the weak red-robed divine priest and said, "If so, why can't she do the same from the Red Lotus Temple if I can spend a day and a night to get here?" The red-robed divine priest sighed softly and said, "The problem is, why did the great divine priest come?" Ning Ke said, "Because she has a lot of questions to ask me." After saying this, he walked into the depths of the White Taoist Temple. Sang Sang was sleeping in one of the bedrooms. He believed that Yi Hongyu would come as soon as she received the news that he was in the capital of the Kingdom of Qi. Just as he said to the red-robed divine priest, Yi Hongyu must have a lot of questions to ask him about Long Qing. If Ning Ke was the person in the world who wanted Long Qing dead the most, then Yi Hongyu would undoubtedly be ranked second. Because the man in the black Taoist robe had been challenging her. But Ning Ke did not tell the red-robed divine priest why he wanted Yi Hongyu to come to see him. Other than exchanging information about Prince Long Qing's resurrection, he had another more important reason. The cold qi in Sang Sang's body was a very tricky problem. Even the pure Haotian divine light in her body could not suppress it. So he wanted to try other methods. The old red-robed divine priest had used the Haotian divine light that he had cultivated for decades on Sang Sang's treatment. That was why he became so weak and tired. Because of this, the red-robed divine priest had gained Ning Ke's trust. But this was far from enough to cure Sang Sang's illness. Ning Ke needed other people who cultivated the West Hill divine skills. Yi Hongyu was undoubtedly the best candidate. At this time, Ning Ke did not know that this person had become the West Hill Great Divine Priest of Judgment. In his eyes, Yi Hongyu was the medicine that Sang Sang needed the most. I'm going home. I've been rushing around. I'd like to announce in advance that from the 16th until the end of the month. Yes, let's have fun together. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 539. In the capital of the Kingdom of Qi, vigorous and chilling music rang out. 600 papal cavalrymen of the West Hill Divine Palace dressed in black and gold-gray armor walked solemnly on the straight street. In the middle of the procession was an extremely gorgeous divine chariot. The chariot was surrounded by layers of gauze that fluttered in the autumn wind, but the face of the person sitting inside could not be seen clearly. Even if the truth could be seen clearly, no one dared to. The papal cavalrymen looked solemnly ahead. The people on both sides of the street knelt devoutly. Their cheeks, which were pressed against the soil, were filled with excitement and fanaticism. Some people even fainted from happiness. The divine chariot came to a stop in front of the White Taoist Temple. All the priests and Taoists of the West Hill Divine Palace who were stationed in the Kingdom of Qi knelt silently on both sides of the stone steps. The highest-ranking priest in the Taoist Temple of the Kingdom of Qi, dressed in red, said respectfully to the divine chariot, "Welcome, great divine priest of judgment, to the human world." The solemn music started again, and the autumn wind gradually calmed down. However, the curtains around the sacred sedan moved even though there was no wind. They were slowly lifted, and an extremely beautiful girl slowly walked down from the sedan. She wore a divine crown studded with jewels. The autumn light of dusk refracted repeatedly in those jewels, and then shrouded her beautiful and emotionless face. She faintly released an otherworldly aura of nobility. This was the first time Yi Hongyu had left the West Hill and come to the human world after succeeding as the great divine priest of judgment. She was no longer the young genius who was obsessed with cultivation. She had supreme authority and power. That was why she did not wear a red dress or a green Taoist robe. Instead, she wore a divine robe. The divine robe of the great divine priest of judgment was red. It was not bright red, but the deepest and heaviest red. It was so red that it was almost black. It seemed to be stained with the blood of countless sinners, like a block of ink that was about to burn in the twilight. Unlike what ordinary people imagined, the divine robe of judgment was not very heavy. It was not embroidered with gold. It was simply and solemnly cut. It was very light and thin. A red carpet had already been laid in front of the Taoist temple of the Kingdom of Qi. There were newly plucked flowering trees by the side of the steps. Yi Hongyu walked indifferently among the flowering trees towards the temple. As she walked, the light divine robe on her body gradually fluttered in the wind. Her graceful figure was faintly discernible. This was a beautiful and alluring scene. However, no one dared to look directly at the divine chariot, much less the body of the great divine priest of judgment. The old priest in red followed beside Yi Hongyu. Just like the priests from the judicial department, he lowered his head desperately, as if he wanted to be blind. The papal cavalrymen in black armor dismounted and took over the defense of the Taoist hall in the shortest time possible. Similarly, no one dared to look into the flowering trees. Beautiful things and people should be appreciated. Seductive gracefulness was worthy of fanatical worship. However, once these beauties and seductions were associated with a great divine priest of West Hill, it was dangerous. They did not want to be, so they of divine of Hill of West Hill. And of divine. Of divine of yang. Of hill of priest of Chen of mountain, in, and of Qi, hill of great of spirits of yen of hill, lin, of. They did not want to sink into such a situation, which was worse than death, so they did not dare to look. There was only one person who could look directly at Yi Hongyu's beautiful face and seductive body under the divine robe. His expression was calm, but he did not hide the admiration and desire in his eyes. Yi Hongyu looked at the young man in the black uniform of the academy behind the door of the temple. A smile suddenly appeared on her beautiful face, which her subordinates had never seen. Her smile was very complicated. It was a little mocking, emotional, disdainful, and contemptuous. It was definitely not a sweet smile. But it was just a smile. She seemed to have returned from the infinite light and solemn divine kingdom to the human world, from the high and mighty great divine priest to the house by Yanming Lake in Chang'an. Yi Hongyu walked into the temple. The heavy door of the temple slowly closed behind her. All the subordinates and officials of the divine hall of the kingdom of Qi looked at the closed door in shock. They did not know why the great divine priest had left them outside. Beside the divine chariot at the bottom of the stone steps of the temple, there was a man who was as burly as a mountain. He slowly raised his head and looked at the door. His face was full of hatred. But a moment later, the hatred on his face turned into confusion and fear. Even though the whole world admits that you are the most beautiful woman in Haotian Taoism, you will become a statue if you always pretend to be lonely and hopeless. No matter how beautiful you are, you will still make people feel that you are lifeless. Ning Ke looked at Yi Hongyu and said seriously, "You are more beautiful when you smile. I like to see you smile." Yi Hongyu reached out and took off the jeweled crown from her head and handed it to him. Then she rubbed her sore neck and said, "Can I interpret what you said as flirting?" Ning Ke took the crown and realized that it was indeed very heavy. Thinking that he was holding the crown of the great divine priest of judgment, even he felt a little nervous. He said, "How would I dare to flirt with you?" Yi Hongyu walked into the temple. As she walked, she untied her intricately combed hair. Her long black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall. She looked very relaxed. Ning Ke followed her with the crown in his arms. Yi Hongyu took out a handkerchief from the sleeve of her robe and casually tied up her black hair. Listening to the footsteps behind her, she said, "You have always been the most courageous person in the world. The future divine priest of light has been played with and taught by you every day. Why would you be afraid of flirting with me?" Ning Ke sighed when he heard that. He said, "Speaking of which, the boldest and most presumptuous imagination of my childhood probably did not include marrying a great divine priest of West Hill. Naturally, I did not expect that one day I would hold the crown and talk about such an intimate topic with another great divine priest of West Hill." Yi Hongyu turned to look at him and said expressionlessly, "But I have to warn you. Don't act too intimate with Sang Sang in front of the believers of Haotian Taoism. Just like before, you said that I look better when I smile. If you said that before the doors of the temple closed, the believers and subordinates outside would definitely think that you are blaspheming Haotian. Then, even if you are a core disciple of the headmaster of academy, they would still chop you into pieces." Ning Ke said, "Flirting with you is just a habit. As for Sang Sang, she is my wife. Even the hierarch lord has no right to control her. What can your subordinates do to me?" Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly and said, "Do you really think so?" Ning Ke thought of the hundreds of papal knights he saw earlier, especially the dozens of judicial priests who were obviously in the see-through state. He could not help but fall silent, especially the burly man beside the sacred sedan. Even though he had entered the knowing destiny state, he could still feel the man's power and even some kind of danger. Today and tomorrow, I need to sort out the details of the plot so that it will be easier for me to break out. So, I will write less. Again, from the 16th onwards, for the next half a month, please watch my performance. It will be very sustained and powerful. I don't ask for a moment, but we will be together forever. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 540. A man who could make Ning Ke feel threatened must be extraordinarily powerful. At the very least, he must have surpassed the threshold of the knowing destiny state. Such a powerful grand cultivator was only Yi Hongyu's follower. Ning Ke thought of the dozens of see-through state powerhouses walking around the divine sedan of judgment. He was shocked that Haotian Taoism had hidden such a powerful force, and finally had a clear understanding of Yi Hongyu's power. There were winding corridors and stairs in the white Taoist temple building. The red twilight shone through the stone windows and refracted on the stone steps, giving off a warm aura. Yi Hongyu lifted her blood-red divine robe with both hands, revealing her fair ankles. She did not care that this posture was somewhat indecent and walked up the stone steps. Her movements were light, and her casually tied black hair swayed behind her. She looked like a village girl in the south of the Tang Empire stepping on grapes in a barrel with her long skirt. Ning Ke followed behind her and looked at this scene. He was not intoxicated by the seduction in the whiteness, but he had to admit that it was really beautiful. Whether it was the Tao addict in the past or the great divine priest of judgment now, Yi Hongyu would never show her girlish side in front of her subordinates and believers, nor would she deliberately spread her aura of seduction. She would only show her true self in front of those she truly trusted or those she thought qualified to be her opponent. The most beautiful Taoist girl was now faintly plated with a layer of divinity's brilliance, making her look even more unbearable. However, when she took off the layer of divinity's brilliance and revealed her true self, she looked even more alluring. Ning Ke knew that she was not deliberately seducing him, but he knew that this kind of inadvertent seduction was like a divine robe swaying in the wind, revealing the faintly discernible body underneath. It was the sweetest and most tempting honey. He did not want to taste this kind of honey. He moved his gaze away from Yi Hongyu's back and looked at the priests of the judicial department in the temple. He asked, "Who is that burly man beside the divine sedan?" "Luo Kadi." Yi Hongyu stood on the stone steps and turned around. The hem of her ink-red divine robe spread out with this movement, slightly changing into an oval red flower. It spread out with the wind and then closed up, covering her bare legs. Hearing this name, Ning Ke could not help but be shocked speechless. He had heard of a divine guard commander called Luo Kadi in the West Hill Divine Palace when he was in the academy. He was very powerful and was the Hierarch Lord's most trusted aide. Yi Hongyu knew what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. She said indifferently, "He is the Hierarch's dog. The Hierarch did not allow me to kill dogs, so he lent me this dog for a few days." "You really have guts." Ning Ke walked up the stone stairs, looked at her and said, "I heard that you once injured him, but I didn't expect that you would dare to keep him by your side. After all, he is a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state. If you really push him too hard, he will bite back at you. No matter if he is in the knowing destiny state or an ordinary person, as long as he starts to be a dog, he can only be a dog for the rest of his life. There is no difference between being the Hierarch's dog and being my dog. How can a dog dare to rebel against its master?" Yi Hongyu looked at Ning Ke and said, "Speaking of courage, you have the guts to let Sang Sang appear in the kingdom of Qi when the entire Haotian Taoism was unprepared." Ning Ke frowned slightly and said, "What do you mean by that?" Yi Hongyu turned around and walked into the quiet stone corridor. She said, "The former divine priest of light was the most outstanding figure in the West Hill Divine Palace in the past 100 years. Even compared to the divine Lord Lotus, the divine priest of light was not inferior. It was just that he had always kept a low profile and was not willing to show off." Ning Ke thought about it silently. More than 10 years ago, the divine priest of light had stirred up 2 bloody storms in Chang'an and the villages in the Yan territory. How could such a figure not be coquettish? Yi Hongyu knew about his background and did not continue the topic. She said, "For decades, the former divine priest of light had trained many capable subordinates in the West Hill Divine Palace. These subordinates either held important positions in the Peach Mountain or were stationed in the temples of the vassal states. Just like the priest in red you have met, the divine priest of light had gained the absolute loyalty of so many people. He could even be compared to the Hierarch Lord." Ning Ke asked, "What does this have to do with Sang Sang?" Yi Hongyu slowly stopped and said, "The divine priest of light has been imprisoned for more than a decade. These loyal priests have had a hard time in the divine hall. Many of them have been quietly killed, and many have been pushed to the edge. What's amazing is that these people's loyalty to the Divine Priest of Light has not changed at all. The Divine Priest of Light was able to escape from the Yu prison and go to Chang, and because of these loyal subordinates. It was a pity that he died with Uncle Yen Sei outside Chang'an. So these loyal subordinates had waited for more than 10 years, but they still could not welcome their spring. Until the whole world knew that the Divine Priest of Light had a successor. She turned to look at Ning Ke and said, "There are many people in Haotian Taoism who are fervently waiting for the day that Sang Sang returns to the West Hill Divine Palace. There are also many people who are wary of her return. Originally, the Hierarch Lord and I thought that since the great Divine Priest of Revelation said that it would happen in 3 years, Ning Ke reminded her, now it is 2 years later." Yi Hongyu continued. The Divine Hall should have enough time to prepare for Sang Sang's return. However, no one expected that you would let Sang Sang appear in the Taoist Hall of the Kingdom of Qi so much earlier. So many troubles may come early. Ning Ke frowned slightly and asked, "Will the return be troublesome?" Yi Hongyu said, "The successor of the Divine Priest of Light has always been appointed by the previous generation. Even when the great Divine Priest of Light rebelled and founded the Devil's Doctrine 1,000 years ago, the next great Divine Priest of Light of the West Hill Divine Palace was still appointed by him. Because only light is closest to light. Sang Sang has the inheritance of the previous Divine Priest of Light. So everyone in the West Hill Divine Palace knows that the next great Divine Priest of Light is and can only be her. However, there will always be some people who are not satisfied. Even if they do not dare to do anything disrespectful, they can try some tricks." Ning Ke asked, "For example, what kind of tricks?" Yi Hongyu said, "The West Hill Divine Palace rules all the believers of Haotian in the world. It is the holiest and dirtiest place in the world. It is not surprising that weird things happen there." Ning Ke was silent for a long time when he heard this. Then he said, "I don't care what problems there are in Haotian Taoism, and I don't care how dirty it is. But I have to remind you that after Sang Sang goes to the West Hill, no matter if it is the Hierarch Lord, the great Divine Priest of Revelation, or you have to ensure her safety." Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. She was not happy with his tone. Ning Ke looked at her and said, "Because she is my wife, and I am a disciple of the academy. If anything happens to her, or if she is unhappy, I will be very unhappy." Yi Hongyu looked at him and said mockingly, "Who are you?" Ning Ke said seriously, "My second brother likes Sang Sang very much." Yi Hongyu was silent. Ning Ke reached out and patted her shoulder. He did not care what kind of shock it would cause if people outside the Taoism hall saw this. He comforted her and said, "Of course, the academy will not punish you for no reason. You know that we are not unreasonable people." Yi Hongyu looked up at him and said quietly, "I did not expect you to be so shameless even now. But do you really think that Jun Mo's name and the academy's name can scare me? The way I call myself does sound." Ning Ke's voice suddenly stopped because he saw 2 sacred and majestic divine lights burning in the depths of Yi Hongyu's beautiful eyes. The 2 divine lights seemed to come from the divine kingdom and represented the will of the great existence. His consciousness and body suddenly felt an unprecedented fear. He groaned and forced himself to look away. In an instant, his clothes were soaked in cold sweat. He knew that if he had really gone against the divine lights in Yi Hongyu's eyes, his consciousness would have been burned to ashes. He still had lingering fear. Could this be the legendary great divine priest of West Hill's talent? Yi Hongyu walked towards the room in the depths of the stone corridor again. Ning Ke rubbed his eyes and followed her. He complained angrily, "Did you really want to kill me just now?" Yi Hongyu said, "I said at Yanming Lake that the next time we meet, I will kill you." Ning Ke said mockingly, "You also said it in the wilderness. But later on, you came to Chang and to eat and stay with me. I don't see you being embarrassed." Yi Hongyu said, "There will be a time to kill you." Ning Ke frowned and suddenly asked, "Why do you always insist on killing me?" Yi Hongyu said, "Because I hate you. I have never seen someone as shameless as you." Ning Ke said, there are many people in the world who are more shameless than me. This is not a reason. Yi Hongyu stopped and said after a moment of silence, Haotian Taoism and the academy will eventually fight. I have told you before that among the core disciples of the headmaster of academy, only you understand what it means to fight. So in the future war, you will be the most dangerous enemy for Haotian Taoism. That is why I have always wanted to kill you. Ning Ke said, should I be proud that the great divine priest of judgment is so wary of me? Yi Hongyu continued walking and said, or sad. Ning Ke said mockingly, can you kill me? Yi Hongyu said matter-of-factly, of course. Ning Ke's smile became a little awkward. He insisted and said, you should be able to see that I am very strong now. Yi Hongyu did not look back and said indifferently, I am even stronger now. Ning Ke was a little angry and said, then do you want to try and kill me now? At this moment, the two had already walked to the quiet room. Yi Hongyu turned around and looked at him. She said, I said at Yanming Lake that if I have the chance to kill you in the future, I will spare you once. There are 2 such promises, and I have used it today. Ning Ke shook his head firmly and said, this does not count. Yi Hongyu said, if I say it counts, then it counts. Ning Ke said, if I say it doesn't count, then it doesn't count. Yi Hongyu said, if I say it doesn't count, then it doesn't count. At this moment, she suddenly came to her senses. She felt that this conversation was really childish and boring, so she did not continue. Ning Ke pushed open the closed door and said, please. Yi Hongyu looked at Sang Sang who was sleeping on the bed. She looked at her pale face and suddenly said, why should I help you? Ning Ke said, she is the future great divine priest of light of the West Hill Divine Palace. Yi Hongyu said, she is your wife, not mine. Ning Ke was a little angry. Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, don't pretend to be angry in front of me. You know it is useless. Ning Ke suddenly relaxed and asked helplessly, then what do you want in return? Yi Hongyu stretched out a finger and looked at him. She said, count it as once. Ning Ke understood that she meant a chance to spare his life. Without hesitation, he stretched out his finger and hooked hers. He said, deal. Yi Hongyu tilted her head slightly and looked at their hooked fingers in the air. She seemed to be deep in thought. Then she shook her head and walked into the room. It was late autumn, and the sun was setting early. The red twilight was gradually swallowed by the buildings in the capital of the kingdom of Qi. The priests and knights of the West Hill Divine Palace guarded the White Taoist temple in silence. They looked at the closed door and thought nervously about what was happening inside. At this moment, a room above the Taoist temple suddenly emitted countless rays of light. It was the pure and holy Haotian's divine light. It instantly engulfed the window and then slowly descended. The sun had already set. A new morning sun rose in the capital of the kingdom of Qi. The people outside the Taoist temple felt the majesty and love in the divine light. They all knelt on the ground. Those who saw the morning sun in the twilight, whether it was the imperial concubine of the kingdom of Qi in the palace or the devout believers in the slums, all knelt in that direction and prayed in awe. From tomorrow onwards, prepare to die. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 541. The last ray of twilight disappeared, and the capital of Qi Kingdom was covered by the darkness of night. The light in the White Taoist temple also gradually faded away. The devout worshippers woke up from their awe and intoxicated state and stared blankly at the window. No one knew what they were thinking. The lights of thousands of households gradually lit up. The door opened and Yi Hongyu walked out. Her beautiful face was still cold and emotionless, but she could not hide the tiredness in her eyes. Ning Ke noticed her tiredness and even haggard, but he did not say anything. He walked into the room and sat by the bed. He held Sang Sang's slender wrist and felt it silently for a moment. After confirming that Sang Sang's condition had improved, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. He tucked her in and put a new wet towel on her forehead. Then he walked out of the room. He looked at Yi Hongyu, who was leaning against the stone wall, and said sincerely, "Thank you for your hard work." Yi Hongyu noticed that he did not thank her. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "Aren't you going to thank me?" Ning Ke said, "It was at the cost of my life." Yi Hongyu said, "Your prescription and the herbs in the Taoist temple seem to have worked. The poison in her body has been mostly neutralized, but I can only suppress the cold aura for now." After a short pause, she frowned slightly and continued, "That night by the Yanming Lake, I knew that the divine light in the Lady of Light's body was much purer and more abundant than mine. Even she could not get rid of the cold aura in her body, so naturally I could not either. Speaking of which, where did the cold aura come from?" Ning Ke told her the story of how he picked up Sang Sang from a pile of corpses by the roadside. Yi Hongyu did not get rid of her doubts. Instead, she frowned even more and said, "Corpses and decaying water are indeed the most mean and filthy things in the world. The cold rain from the sky does great harm to the baby girl's body. But how can this acquired coldness compete with the Haotian divine light in the Lady of Light's body?" Ning Ke looked at her expectantly and asked, "Do you have any ideas?" Yi Hongyu looked into his eyes and asked, "Does the headmaster have any ideas?" Ning Ke shook his head. Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "Even the headmaster of the academy can't do anything about the cold aura in her body. How dare you ask me if there's any way? Even though you said it out of desperation, you still look like an idiot." Ning Ke's expression became a little gloomy and he forced a bitter smile. Looking at his expression and thinking of how Ning Ke had hooked his fingers with her without hesitation before she used the divine skill on Sang Sang, Yi Hongyu felt for the first time that this shameless disciple of the academy was not completely useless. Thinking of this, she looked at Ning Ke and said with a gentle expression, "Since the headmaster said that the Buddhism sect has a way to cure Sang Sang's illness, then your trip to the Lank Temple will be fruitful." Ning Ke smiled and asked, "Are you comforting me?" Yi Hongyu said, "You can understand it this way." Ning Ke said, "What I can't understand is that you are the one who comforts me." Because he was laughing heartily, the dimples on his cheeks looked especially bright. Yi Hongyu looked at his face and said, "You are indeed a little cute, but your personality is really disgusting." The priests and knights of the Kingdom of Qi's Taoist temple and the judicial department were all blocked outside by the tightly shut door. At this time, the Taoist temple was quiet and empty. The lights in the stone corridor were naturally not lit. The stars in the capital that leaked in through the stone window facing the street were not very bright, but they were not dark either. Ning Ke looked at the face of the girl from Haotian Taoism in the dim light. He looked at her tired and haggard eyes. He looked at her clear eyebrows, bright eyes, and tender lips. He suddenly felt that this was the most beautiful and charming Yi Hongyu he had ever seen. His right hand that was hanging by his leg trembled slightly. With a slight tremble, his fingertips touched something hard. He raised the teacup in his hand and handed it to her. Yi Hongyu took the teacup and drank the cold tea that was still thick. It was very quiet in the corridor. The disciples of the back of the mountain of the academy and the great divine priest of judgment of the West Hill Divine Palace leaned against the cool stone wall in silence. They looked at the faint light from the window and did not speak for a long time. After a long time, Ning Ke suddenly said, "You said it before today, at the Yanming Lake and in the wilderness, that the academy and your Haotian Taoism are natural enemies. One day, there will be a magnificent war, and that day is coming faster and faster. Have you ever thought about what we should do if we really meet on the battlefield one day?" Yi Hongyu held the teacup and looked up at him. Her eyes were full of mockery. She said, "We are all people without friends, so why do we have to pretend to be friends and talk about the past and the future? You want to make our relationship closer just to save your life in the future. This is a little shameless." Ning Ke did not explain and said, "I just want to know what you will do if that day really comes." Yi Hongyu said without hesitation, "I have said that you are the most dangerous enemy to Taoism. So if the day of war really comes, of course I will kill you at all costs." Ning Ke took the teacup from her hand and brought it to his lips. He said thoughtfully, "That makes sense. For someone as dangerous as you, I should also try my best to kill you first." After saying this, he poured the last few drops of tea into his mouth and drank it. It was extremely bitter. Yi Hongyu was a little annoyed to see him drink the remaining tea from her teacup. But when she saw him frown because of the bitterness after drinking the remaining tea, she suddenly did not want to be angry anymore. "I will not show mercy." Yi Hongyu looked at the night view of the capital outside the stone window and said indifferently. But it was unknown whether she was saying this to Ning Ke, herself, or her loyal subordinates outside the temple. Ning Ke thought about the scenery and people in Chang'an, the countryside scenery he saw on his way south, and the farmers and soldiers who kept watering the fertile fields. He said, "I feel the same." The dim stone corridor fell into silence once again. It was still Ning Ke who broke the silence. He looked at Yi Hongyu and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, I have yet to congratulate you." Yi Hongyu was slightly startled and said, "Congratulate me for what?" Ning Ke saw that she did not seem to be faking it and knew that she would never pretend to be mature when it came to the ways of the world. He could not help but sigh silently. He thought that she was still the Tao addict who could not be disturbed by external things and had a pure Taoist heart. Sitting on the seat of heavenly black jade and becoming the great divine priest of judgment. Isn't that something worth celebrating? Chen Pipi said that there were only a few who became the great divine priest at your age in the past 1,000 years. Yi Hongyu finally knew that he was congratulating her. She said calmly, "Ever since I started cultivating, I knew that I would definitely become the great divine priest of West Hill. From the first day I entered the judicial department, I knew that I would sit on the seat of heavenly black jade one day. So it is only natural. Why should I celebrate?" Ning Ke sighed and said, "Only I understand you. Otherwise, if anyone in the world heard what you said, they would think that your narcissism has already surpassed that of my second brother. You are almost crazy with narcissism." Yi Hongyu heard him comparing her to Jun Emo and smiled slightly. She was very satisfied. Ning Ke turned to look at her face and looked into the deepest part of her bright eyes. He recalled the indescribable brilliance in her eyes during the day and said with emotion, "Among the younger generation of cultivators, as long as they are talented and narcissistic, they have been chasing after your footsteps all these years. However, they could never catch up with you. You have always been at the forefront and even pulled further and further behind. So I really admire you." Yi Hongyu looked into his eyes and felt the brilliance hidden in his black pupils. She said, "You have only cultivated for a few years, but you have become a grand cultivator from an ordinary person who knows nothing about Taoism. If you want to talk about admiration, among the younger generation, you are the only one that I admire and am even wary of." Ning Ke smiled and said, "Praise and self-praise are always pleasing things. However, there is no audience at this time. It is rare for us to flatter each other, so it is a pity that we are walking in the dark." Yi Hongyu said, "But since you congratulate me, I should congratulate you too." Ning Ke said, "It is not a happy thing that I have entered the knowing destiny state." There was a lot hidden in his words, which included the fragments in the depths of his consciousness, Master Lotus's generous inheritance, the terrifying and bloody devil's doctrine skills, and the fire in the Red Lotus Temple. Even Long Qing did not fully understand what had happened to him at that time. Yi Hongyu naturally did not know either. She looked at him in confusion. Ning Ke casually said, "You have entered the knowing destiny state long ago. Shanshan has also entered it. Senior brother Chen Pipi entered it many years ago. In front of you, I have no right to be proud." Yi Hongyu said, "I have said many times that we are different from ordinary cultivators. The knowing destiny state is more important to us, because the state is a means of fighting for us." Ning Ke said, "I always feel that you have repeated this statement countless times. Are you telling the world that we are the same person, like two pearls in the bottom of the sea, a match made in heaven? It has always been so. I dared to challenge the former divine priest of judgment when I had just entered the knowing destiny state, even though he had not recovered from the injury left by the divine priest of light at that time. You could kill Xiaohou before you entered the knowing destiny state. Once you entered the knowing destiny state, even Long Qing, who had many adventures, was no match for you. She said proudly, not many cultivators are like us. Long Qing is not, the calligraphy addict is not, and Shen Pipi is not, even though he has been called a rare genius of Haotian Taoism since he was young. Ning Ke did not expect that Yi Hongyu would completely ignore his deliberate teasing. He could not help but feel speechless. When he heard her mention Shen Pipi, he suddenly showed a disapproving expression. There are many kinds of geniuses. The talents of cultivation geniuses should be reflected in cultivation, not just in fighting or killing like you and me. I have never seen such a genius like Senior Brother 12 in my life, but he doesn't know it at all. When it comes to the purity of his Taoist heart, he is much better than you and Long Qing. He looked at Yi Hongyu and warned, Senior Brother seems to be not good at fighting, but that is only because he does not like fighting. If he is forced to fight one day, you will probably understand how scary he is. Hearing his comments about Shen Pipi, Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. She thought of the fair and chubby boy in the Taoist temple when she was young. He was a guy who liked to peek at female Taoist priests when they were bathing when he was bored. He was a coward who screamed like a girl when she punched him and did not dare to resist. She could not imagine how terrifying he was. Ning Ke looked at her thoughtful expression and suddenly asked, "How did you become the great divine priest of judgment?" "I only heard some rumors in Cheng, and that you killed the former great divine priest." Yi Hongyu said in a very normal tone, "Unlike the inheritance of the divine priest of light, the great divine priest of judgment has never appointed a successor. There is no definite successor, so there is no process of returning to the throne. For thousands of years, the seat of heavenly black jade has been changing hands in bloody battles. There is no other way to become the great divine priest of judgment. I killed the previous great divine priest, so naturally I inherited his position." Ning Ke looked slightly serious and asked, "If there are other powerhouses on the Peach Mountain of West Hill who want to become the great divine priest of judgment, what they need to do is to kill you?" Yi Hongyu said indifferently, "Yes, but it seems that no one dares to kill me for now." Ning Ke looked at her and said, "But I know someone who wants to kill you and dares to." Yi Hongyu knew who he was talking about and said, "He can't kill me." Ning Ke said, "But you have to admit that he has been in the divine hall of judgment for so many years and has so many loyal subordinates. He will definitely not give up the chance to sit on the seat of heavenly black jade." Yi Hongyu knew that the conversation had entered the main topic. After a moment of silence, she said, "Long Qing is a dog. Although he is different from Luo Kadi, he is not the hierarch's dog, nor is he my dog. Although he has many lucky chances that even I find unbelievable, he is still a dog." Ning Ke looked into her eyes and said, "You said that a dog will not rebel against its owner. But have you ever thought that a mad dog does not know who its owner is? It will become crazy and dangerous." Yi Hongyu looked back at him quietly and said, "It seems that he left a deep impression on you in the Red Lotus Temple yesterday." Ning Ke thought of the cold autumn rain, the blood-stained grass, the fire in the ruined temple, the empty arrow box, and the black peach blossoms. After a long silence, he said, "Long Qing made me feel fear yesterday." Yi Hongyu said, "But you still beat him." Ning Ke said, "But he did not die. I don't know if I can beat him next time." Yi Hongyu said, "What are you trying to say? Don't tell me that the West Hill Divine Palace does not know how terrifying he is now. If we let him live, he will become stronger and crazier day by day. In this world, the two people he wants to kill the most are you and me. So we should kill him while he is not strong enough." Ning Ke stared into her eyes and said, "I beg you to kill him." This is the first chapter. The second chapter will be updated before 6 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 542. Yi Hongyu did not say anything. She just looked at him quietly. Ning Ke looked at her and continued, Long Qing's survival will do no good to the West Hill Divine Palace or the Tang Empire. I have no way to kill him now, so I need you to do it yourself. Yi Hongyu suddenly said, since he has betrayed the Divine Hall, he will not be able to survive in Haotian's world. So he will definitely leave the Central Plains and enter the wilderness. Ning Ke said, that is what I am worried about. The wilderness is boundless. If he hides in Tianqi Mountain with the fallen knights, who can find him? But if he wants to leave the Central Plains and enter the wilderness, he has to pass through the Yan Kingdom. I don't think Long Qing and his subordinates can do it. Yi Hongyu said, because you have forgotten that there is someone in the Yan Kingdom. Compared to us, that person is the one that Long Qing wants to kill the most. Correspondingly, that person also wants Long Qing to die the most. You mean Crown Prince Chongming? Ning Ke only then realized that the West Hill Divine Palace had already made arrangements. But he still felt that it was not reliable. He frowned and said, even if Crown Prince Chongming can control the cavalry of the Yan Kingdom, they are still ordinary people. I don't think he has the ability to kill Long Qing. Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, even if he can't kill him, he can at least delay him for a while. Ning Ke understood something and said, delay is to wait for someone to arrive. Yi Hongyu said, exactly. Ning Ke looked into her eyes and said, you go personally. Yi Hongyu looked back at him calmly and said, I will go personally. Ning Ke immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, goodbye. Yi Hongyu raised her eyebrows and said, it seems that you don't want to see me in front of you. If it were any other time, I would be very willing to make a pot of good tea, cut a few plates of beef, and have a long talk with you. But I am really anxious now. No matter how good the tea is, it should not go with beef. It should go with liquor. As a disciple of the headmaster of the academy, you actually made such a mistake. It seems that you are really anxious. Ning Ke looked down at his boots and thought of the blood that the boots had stepped on yesterday. He said, yesterday in front of the Red Lotus Temple, Long Qing said that he might be the son of Yama. Hearing this, Yi Hongyu smiled. Her smile had a complicated meaning. She looked at Ning Ke and said, now everyone in the world is guessing that you are the son of Yama. But because there is no evidence, neither the Haotian Taoism or the Buddhism sect has done anything. But you are saying that Long Qing is? Ning Ke looked up and spread his hands and said with a smile, at least from the stories over these years, Long Long is more like the son of Yama than me, because he is darker and more miserable than me. Than me. Yi Hongyu said, this does not prove anything. You must know that the reason why everyone is guessing that you are the son of Yama is because the former divine priest of light used his eyes to discover you in Chang'an. Ning Ke said, but what he saw may not be true. In fact, the West Hill Divine Palace denied his opinion. The Abbey Dean put him in the U prison. Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly. After a long silence, she suddenly said, but have you ever thought that if the divine priest of light was wrong, why would Haotian Taoism have such a strong reaction? Why did the Abbey Dean come back to the human world and put him down personally? I don't know what happened back then, but I have a feeling that it is not so simple. Most things in the world are simple or complicated. The reason why the Abbey Dean suppressed Wei Guangming in person was that the old man was too obsessed. He still wanted to stir up a storm of blood in Chang'an and kill the son of Yama in his imagination. The Abbey Dean cared about the world and Haotian Taoism. How could he let him provoke another war between Haotian Taoism and the academy? Ning Ke said calmly, I have thought about these things, but you probably haven't thought about it. Even if Wei Guangming is the most powerful divine priest of light in the West Hill Divine Palace in 100 years, light and darkness are always beyond the human realm. How could he see through the arrangements of Yama? Maybe the truth that Wei Guangming saw was the truth in the mirror. That's why he mistook illusion for reality. I am just an illusion that Yama cast in the human world. I am a fake person in the mirror. Long Qing is not in the mirror. He is the real one. The door of the Taoist temple opened slowly. The burning torches were blown by the air that gushed out of the temple. The light around the stone steps suddenly flickered. Yi Hongyu's blood-red robe of judgment fluttered in the night wind. She walked out with an indifferent expression. Everyone, including the priest in red, bowed to her as they looked at her. Yi Hongyu did not talk to the priests in the Taoist temple, nor did she go to the palace to accept the emperor of the kingdom of Qi's greeting. She got on the sacred sedan and left with 500 divine hall papal knights and dozens of subordinates of the judicial department. The sacred sedan arrived at dusk and left shortly after nightfall. She left the West Hill Divine Palace and came to the capital of the human world. It seemed that she had made a special trip to meet Ning Ke and Cure Sang Sang. The subordinates of the judicial department, who had been silent all this while, could no longer suppress the shock in their hearts. They looked at the dark window above the Taoist temple in confusion, thinking that the relationship between the academy and the great divine priest of judgment was unexpectedly close if the great divine priest of judgment could summon them at will. Luo Kadi, who was as burly as a mountain, walked silently behind the sacred sedan. He looked indifferently at the faintly discernible figure behind the veil of the sacred sedan. The fanaticism and greed in his eyes quickly disappeared. You are obsessed with Taoism, so you are called the Tao addict. But are you really the Tao addict in the eyes of your believers? He thought silently that she would use the power of the academy to strengthen her position in the divine hall. How could such a person be ignorant of the world? The autumn wind of the entire continent gradually turned cold. Capital Cheng, the capital of the Yan kingdom located in the north, was even colder. Winter had arrived. Withered leaves were blown by the wind on the quiet long street, rolling all over the ground, accompanied by a crisp sound of breaking into powder. Most of the streets in the capital of the Yan kingdom had been cordoned off since morning. Other than the armed troops, no one could be seen on the streets. Even so, the soldiers were extremely vigilant. They stood with their backs to the street and stared at all moving objects in front of them, including the fallen leaves. All of this was because of the huge sacred sedan that was moving slowly on the long street. The sacred sedan had just entered the capital from the south gate of the Yan kingdom. It passed by the Yan kingdom's imperial palace but did not enter. Instead, it went to the north gate. The sacred sedan was magnificent and huge, as if it was a moving Taoist temple. It was accompanied by hundreds of papal cavalrymen and dozens of powerhouses from the judicial department. Logically speaking, it should be moving very slowly. In fact, it was moving very slowly. However, the amazing thing was that the sacred sedan was in the capital of the Qi kingdom in the south a few days ago. Now, it had appeared in the capital of the Yan kingdom in the north. This itself was almost a miracle. The veil around the sacred sedan was very thin. Even though it was like the willow trees in the winter fog, it could not completely block out the light and cold wind. It was a little cold inside the sacred sedan. Yi Hongyu was still wearing the thin blood-red robe. Her feet were bare as she stepped on the velvet blanket. She did not seem to feel the cold at all. Crown Prince Chongming tightened his robe and tried to make his sitting posture more upright and respectful. He tried his best not to look at the beautiful girl's bare feet. He knew that although the girl was beautiful, her beauty belonged to Haotian after she put on the blood-red robe. She was not someone mortals like him could get close to. Yi Hongyu looked at the weak man sitting a few feet away and said coldly, "You disappoint me." Crown Prince Chongming smiled bitterly and said, "Great divine priest, although I also want to kill my brother, he is my father's son after all. He has many loyal subordinates in the Yan kingdom. Most importantly, he is now a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state. The Yan kingdom is weak and cannot stop him." Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "No matter how weak a country is, a cultivator cannot resist it. I said in the letter that you have to delay him for some time even if you cannot stop him. It is Chongming's fault to disappoint you." Crown Prince Chongming looked at the northern wilderness outside the city gate. He had a complicated expression on his face and murmured, "This time, no one can stop him." Yi Hongyu looked at the expression on his face and pondered. Prince Long Qing and his fallen knights had successfully broken through several lines of defense of the West Hill Divine Palace. After entering the territory of the Yan Kingdom, they seemed to have melted into the land. They passed through capital Cheng and entered the wilderness without a sound. In many people's eyes, the West Hill Divine Palace's pursuit of this traitor could only end here. Even 1,000 years ago, when the great divine priest of light rebelled, Haotian Taoism did not try to enter the wilderness to kill him. That was because the seemingly barren but actually rich land did not belong to the people of the Central Plains. Haotian's divine light had not completely covered that land. However, to everyone's surprise, the great divine priest of judgment did not turn south at capital Cheng. Instead, he continued into the wilderness. The chilly autumn wind grew stronger in the wilderness. At one point, it blew up all the layers of gauze around the divine chariot. At this moment, some priests were shocked to find that the graceful figure of the great divine priest of judgment was no longer there. In the wilderness northwest of the frontier fortress of the Yan Kingdom, there was a not-so-steep mountain range. There was a hot spring in the mountain and a small lake as blue as the sea beside the mountain. The lake was shaped like a beauty's waist. The autumn wind blew gently between the cliffs. Yi Hongyu's blood-red divine robe fluttered in the wind, outlining her mesmerizing waistline. It was like the thin blue lake below the cliff that could make countless people drown in it. Looking at the few bonfires by the blue lake in the distance, her expression did not change at all. Just like ascending to the great divine priest of judgment, these were all things that came naturally to her. Since she had promised Ning Ke that she would personally kill that mad dog, she would definitely do it. No matter where she went, whether it was in the Central Plains or the wilderness. Just now, I couldn't open Qidian no matter what. I was so anxious. I'm going to eat now. I'll try to finish the 3rd chapter before 10:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 543. Today is Feng Ling's birthday. He asked me to join in on his YY activity. After going to the toilet, I was writing while listening to his YY. Suddenly, the world turned dark. My house has been experiencing power outages recently. I was already very depressed. Just when I was about to get angry, I suddenly found that the entire building was without power. At that time, my wife was still walking the dog downstairs. I was suddenly worried that she would be locked in the elevator with the dog like I did last time. I was terrified. Fortunately, the phone got through, so I went to pick her up with a flashlight. Then, I called Feng Ling and asked him to help me say thank you in YY. But I heard that he posted that if I asked for leave today, I would have to wait until 5 p.m. tomorrow. My dear, fortunately, the electricity still came. Anyway, today was quite exciting, but I really hope that there will not be a second time. It was as blue as the sea and shaped like a waist. In fact, it was just a narrow and thin lake in the north. Ning Ke had once stayed here. Mo Shanshan and the girls of the Black Ink Garden had temporarily rested here. Many interesting stories had happened here, and Yi Hongyu had heard of these stories in the hanging basket in the clouds. It was a pity that when she came to the Blue Lake, she did not face the calligraphy addict with wet black hair behind the curtain of the hot spring, nor did she face the food from Chang and City and the Great River Kingdom. Instead, she faced the bonfires between the piles of stones by the lake and the dozens of people by the bonfires. Long Qing fell into a half-unconscious and half-crazy state of mind when he was attacked by Ning Ke in the Red Lotus Temple. Fortunately, he was taken away by his loyal subordinates. When he woke up, or rather, when he woke up, he did not have time to lament or be depressed. He took these subordinates and unwaveringly embarked on the journey to the north. During the 1,000-mile journey, Long Qing relied on the power he had accumulated in the Divine Hall for many years and successfully broke through the heavy defense lines set by the Judicial Department. He also gathered many of his most loyal subordinates and gave them the precious earth pill. Thus, the fallen knights, who had suffered heavy casualties, became stronger again. Since the news of Long Qing's death spread 2 years ago, the Yan emperor was left with only one son. There were no more disputes in the court. The court and military of the Yan kingdom had long been firmly controlled by Crown Prince Chongming. Therefore, the Divine Hall thought that when Long Qing brought the fallen knights into the Yan kingdom, he would definitely be dealt a fatal blow by his brother. However, to everyone's surprise, Long Qing and his subordinates easily crossed the entire Yan territory. They did not encounter any strong snipers even when they left the fortress. They finally arrived at the wilderness. Sitting by the fire, Prince Long Qing's face was pale. He picked up a handkerchief to cover his mouth from time to time, but he could not stop coughing. Neither could he stop the white handkerchief from being dyed red by the blood he coughed out. He had been seriously injured in the battle with Ning Ke in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple and had not fully recovered yet. He looked at the blue lake in front of him and the thin ice blocks that were piled up on the surface of the lake by the cold autumn wind. He thought of the time when he entered the wilderness from here 2 years ago and how his life had been changed. He could not help but be silent. At this moment, in the depths of the dark green lake, a few clear white ripples suddenly swept past. The black shadows in front of the ripples were obviously left behind by the fish. However, to cause such a big splash, how big did the fish have to be? Long Qing looked at the blood-stained handkerchief in his hand and suddenly laughed at himself. He put the handkerchief back into his sleeve and slowly stood up. He looked at the girl in the ink-red divine robe on the other side of the lake. The divine robe was very thin, but the red on it was very thick. It was as thick as blood, and when it landed on the beautiful body of the young girl, it was as smooth as red velvet, even giving off a solemn and dignified feeling. Long Qing was very familiar with this blood-red divine robe. In the past few years, he had seen the great divine priest of judgment wearing this blood-red robe on the seat of heavenly black jade countless times. He had also fantasized countless times about how he would feel if he wore this divine robe that seemed to be stained with the blood of hundreds of millions of people. Unfortunately, the new owner of this blood-red divine robe was not him. Long Qing was also very familiar with the new owner of the divine priest of judgment. Many years ago, he had made a name for himself in the Revelation Institute. When he was about to shine brightly, a little girl in a green Taoist robe, with a stubborn, proud, and indifferent expression, came before the students of the Revelation Institute under the respectful guidance of the divine priest. From that day on, the two names of Yi Hongyu and Prince Long Qing were often compared. One was the Tao addict, and the other was the divine son of West Hill. They had left the Revelation Institute at the same time and entered the judicial department at the same time. However, what made him feel endless shame was that he had never won against her and never walked ahead of her. When he was in the Revelation Institute, his grades were ranked first. That was because she often did not participate in the examinations. When he entered the see-through state, she had already seen the threshold of the knowing destiny state. He was the second priest of the judicial department of the Divine Hall, and she was the Grand Master of the Judicial Department. 2 years ago in the wilderness, he was about to enter the knowing destiny state before her, but he met with a tragic accident. It was not until later that he realized with some loneliness and bitterness that she could enter the knowing destiny state at any time. Long Qing was very clear that there would be a battle between him and Yi Hongyu in this life. Otherwise, his Taoist heart could not be truly clear, just like the significance of Ning Ke to his cultivation journey. However, he had never thought that this battle would happen under such circumstances. Yi Hongyu walked towards the surface of the lake. Her bare feet stepped lightly on the surface of the lake as she floated forward. Her blood-red divine robe billowed in the wind from time to time. She looked like a fairy bathed in blood. She was a mixture of charm and holiness. If one were to look closely, they would discover that every time she took a step, a thin piece of ice would float to her feet. Those thin pieces of ice seemed to be able to sense her thoughts, or perhaps it could be said that she had a complete grasp of the rules of the movement of everything on this autumn lake. This was even more incredible than walking on the lake. Priest. Divine throne. The fallen knights in black armor stood up in shock when they saw the blood-robed girl on the lake. Their horses neighed in fear, and many of them were so terrified that they forgot to prepare for battle. Long Qing watched silently as Yi Hongyu stepped on the lake ice and approached him. He thought for a moment and then took a deep breath. His psyche power surged out and he summoned his peach blossom without hesitation. In the face of such a terrifying opponent, he knew that any fighting methods, skills, or willpower would be meaningless. He could only use his strongest ability to fight with his opponent. The black peach blossom had 5 petals. One of them had been shot by Ning Kei's primordial 13 arrows, and the other 2 petals had been crushed into powder in front of the ruined temple. It looked a little strange now. There was a sense of disgusting ugliness in its misery, like a rotten fish that had been dead for half a year on a ship. The fallen knights felt the deadly darkness in Prince Long Qing's peach blossom. They were suddenly refreshed and got rid of their natural fear of Yi Hongyu. Dozens of Taoist swords came out of their scabbards with a shrill buzzing sound. They attacked the girl on the lake. The moment Prince Long Qing summoned the black peach blossom, Yi Hongyu's expression changed slightly. That was because she sensed the deadly aura. She thought of the tragedy in the Jishou Abbey and understood what was going on. As for the dozens of seemingly powerful Taoist swords, they were not in her eyes at all. She did not even pay any attention to them. She spread her robe slightly and the holy Haotian divine light spread across the lake. With the help of the earth pill, most of the fallen knights had reached the see-through realm, especially the few cavalry commanders who were lucky enough to survive. Their natal Taoist swords followed the aura of Prince Long Qing and were painted with the darkness of the underworld that they had obtained after sacrificing themselves to Yama. Their power was amazing and could directly break through the front of the armored cavalry. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to resist it. The West Hill divine skill was the nemesis of the Nether Taoist swords. When the seemingly unstoppable black Taoist swords flew to the surface of the lake and into the Haotian divine light around Yi Hongyu, they were like ghosts encountering the scorching sun. The swords trembled violently and emitted green smoke. They let out pitiful wails and lost all their previous power. Some of the black Taoist swords sensed that something was wrong and tried to fly out of the range of the Haotian divine light. However, the green smoke emitted from the swords was like countless invisible ropes that tightly bound them. No matter how hard they tried, they could not fly out of the holy light. They looked like moths trapped in a lampshade. The blood-red robe draped over her jade-like arms like a waterfall. Yi Hongyu calmly stepped on the lake water and slowly and unstoppably walked to the other side of the blue lake. The Haotian divine light emitted from her body was like a huge light shield. It moved along with her on the surface of the lake. The black Taoist swords also moved along with her. The scene was very strange and shocking. Her bare, jade-like feet stepped onto the shore of the lake, leaving a shallow footprint on the ice-cold sandy ground. The holy Haotian divine light gradually disappeared into Yi Hongyu's body. The dozens of black ghostly Taoist swords flew away as if they had been pardoned. Yi Hongyu casually raised her right hand into the air and grabbed one of the ghostly Taoist swords. The moment she grabbed the ghostly Taoist sword, the black sword emitted green smoke as if it had caught fire. Accompanied by the green smoke, the Taoist sword gradually returned to its bright white color. Some of the remaining dozens of ghostly Taoist swords successfully flew back to the side of the fallen knights. Most of them fell miserably into the cold lake water, splashing up countless waves and scaring countless fish in the lake. Yi Hongyu casually snatched the sword and drew it out seemed to be very casual. She stabbed the black peach blossom of life with her sword. Because it was casual, she did not know where the sword style was pointing. How could she dodge it? Long Qing could not dodge the sword style that was a combination of Kuhaoran's sword style and Liu Bai's sword style. He did not even think about dodging it. His face was pale but he resolutely faced it. The tip of the sword touched the black peach blossom lightly. There was a soft, chi sound. The black peach blossom formed from the pure chi of heaven and earth shook violently and showed signs of cracking in an instant. There was no despair in Long Qing's eyes. There was only determination and coldness. In the next moment, the black and white in his eyes fused together again and turned into a gloomy gray. An extremely greedy and violent aura shot out from the black Taoist robe on his body. It immediately caused the autumn lake to ripple. Looking at his strange eyes, Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. Her expression was solemn and disgusted. In the end, it was all disdain and mockery. She flicked her divine robe lightly. The holy divine light mixed with the strong smell of blood struck the vortex formed by the greedy aura in front of her. Holiness and blood, these two auras could not be mixed. At this moment, when they were waved out from the sleeves of her divine robe, they seemed to become the stones in the U-prison of the divine hall that had been soaked in blood for thousands of years. Those stones with the smell of blood were protecting the light of Haotian. Such stones could not be swallowed by any vortex. Victory on the first day. See you all tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 544. Long Qing's face turned cold as he watched Yi Hongyu brush her divine robe. His eyes turned even darker until they lost all signs of life. The greedy and cold aura of nirvanic extermination in the gravel by the lake grew thicker. However, in this cold world, there was always a ray of light that could not be erased. It was a ray of light with a strong smell of blood. It came from the blood-red divine robe. The sleeves of the divine robe danced by the lake. Every time the horn of the robe moved, a gust of wind with a strong smell of blood and holiness would attack the vortex formed by the aura of nirvanic extermination. The strong wind was really like the moss-covered stones in the U-prison of the West Hill Divine Palace. It continuously entered the whirlpool, like lake water falling from the sky into the ground. It shook the surrounding qi of heaven and earth, causing it to tremble and escape in all directions. Countless violent roars sounded in the quiet lake. Affected by Long Qing's gray eyes and Yi Hongyu's mighty attack, the lake water seemed to be boiling. The fish that were hiding in the depths of the lake either fainted or died. They gradually floated up and piled up on the surface of the water in a pile of pale white. The forest further away did not escape the terrifying impact of the countless collisions of auras. The 1,000-year-old branches that stretched out to the surface of the lake broke and the trees shook uneasily. The withered yellow leaves that were left floated weakly into the air. No one knew if they would fall into the lake or be crushed into pieces by the wind. A few cold-resistant magpies curled up their tail feathers in fear. They desperately flapped their wings and flew far away. However, in order to survive the difficult winter in the wilderness, they had already eaten too much and became too fat. They could not increase their speed at all. Therefore, they could not escape the aftermath of the battle between the two powerhouses. They fell to the ground and died. There were countless tiny wounds on Yi Hongyu's body. Countless thin streams of blood flowed out from those wounds and seeped through the light divine robe before slowly dripping to the ground. Soaked in blood, the divine robe appeared even redder. It was like a red flower that had been washed by dew. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The wet divine robe stuck to her body. It was breathtakingly beautiful and extremely alluring. Her face was a little pale, but it was still beautiful and moving. After such a great battle, there was not a speck of dust or blood on her delicate skin. Her eyes, in particular, were abnormally bright, yet they seemed so calm. It formed a clear contrast with her divine robe that was dripping with blood and her alluring body. She was covered in blood, but she was still calm and beautiful. This meant that she was absolutely powerful. On the gravel ground by the lake, dozens of fallen knights were seriously injured. Their blood dyed the stones beneath them red. Long Qing knelt on one knee. His sweaty hair stuck miserably to his forehead. The silver mask on his face was lost somewhere, revealing his badly burned cheek. Yi Hongyu walked forward slowly. With every step she took, more blood flowed out of her body. However, her expression did not change. It was as if she could not feel the pain. It was as if there was an endless amount of blood in her body that could be shed. She walked towards Long Qing and said, "You are indeed much stronger than before. I am very surprised that you did not manage to kill Ning Ke in front of the Red Lotus Temple. However, it is a pity that you are still not as strong as me." Long Qing raised his head with difficulty. He looked at the blood-red robe that was getting closer and closer. He looked at his somewhat tragic face and revealed a strange smile. For some reason, he did not tell Yi Hongyu about the strange things that had happened to Ning Ke during the battle in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple. "I have no interest in the seat of heavenly black jade now. In fact, you really do not need to pay such a high price to abandon your subordinates and take the risk to kill me alone," he said as he panted, still wearing a strange smile on his face. Yi Hongyu walked to a few feet away from him and said, "People like me will not believe that you are so depressed that you want to wander the wilderness in search of freedom and true inner peace. I know that you are not interested in those things. Therefore, there is no reason for me to let you continue to grow stronger to the point that you can threaten me." Long Qing held his knees and said tiredly, "People like you never say anything before killing. Therefore, I am very curious. Why did you give me the chance to say my last words? I heard that you told Ning Ke that you think you are the son of Yama." Yi Hongyu said, "Of course, the main reason why I did not kill you now is that I also need to rest. I do not want to die with a piece of trash like you." Long Qing looked at her and said mockingly, "The Tao addict actually needs to rest now? Is it because your spirit has been worn down by the seat of heavenly black jade after you became the great divine priest of judgment?" Yi Hongyu did not get angry because of his mockery. She said calmly, "It is said that below Haotian, above the divine throne, even if you are a demigod, you are still not a true god. Humans need to rest. Humans need to rest. Yes. Many people have always wanted to be a god, but they do not know that being a human is also a very happy thing, as long as you do not become a ghost." Long Qing said desolately, "I do not know whether I am the son of Yama or a person of the heavens mandate. But I probably cannot be considered a human anymore." The blood-red divine robe gradually dried. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, "No matter whether you are a human or a god, you will become a ghost today. If you are really the son of Yama, then I will send you to see your father." As soon as she finished speaking, she took another step forward. Suddenly, in the forest by the blue lake, there was a sudden dense sound of footsteps. There were also a few extremely strong spiritual powers that instantly covered the gravel ground. Looking at more than 1,000 grassland barbarians wearing fur coats and holding all kinds of weapons rushing out of the forest, Yi Hongyu's eyes suddenly became bright and sharp. The people of the grassland tribes who would appear in the frontier fortress of the north of Yan Kingdom could only belong to the left king's palace, which was now in a precarious situation. Then the several strong spiritual powers that covered the gravel ground must have come from the high priests of the palace. "So you have an agreement with these barbarians. But they are not having a good time now. How could they still send several high priests to pick you up? What did you pay for it?" Yi Hongyu asked. Long Qing stood up. Blood and pus kept flowing from the center of his black Taoist robe. The hole in his body must have been seriously injured in the previous battle. The left king's palace is indeed living a miserable life now. They are attacked by the desolate man and the people of the Central Plains. Just like me now, I am attacked by the divine Hall of Light and Ning Ke in the dark. You asked me what I have to pay to win the trust of these grassland people. In fact, I have not paid anything." He looked at Yi Hongyu and said, "The Yen people and the left king's palace have been neighbors for many years. We have been enemies for many years and friends for many years. Coincidentally, I have been a friend of their new Chanyu since many years ago. More importantly, we are in the same situation now and have the same goal." Yi Hongyu asked, "What goal?" Long Qing said, "To become strong again and then, to take revenge." Yi Hongyu was silent. Long Qing said, "Actually, I did not expect that you would catch up with me here." But fortunately, as you said, no matter how strong you are only a human, not a real god. So you need to rest, which gave me a chance to turn things around. At the same time, I am also very grateful to myself for being able to stand in front of you until now. Yi Hongyu suddenly smiled slightly. Her beautiful face was slightly pale, but this smile instantly brightened her beauty. Long Qing was not in the mood to appreciate her beauty, even though he was sometimes amazed by her beauty in the West Hill Divine Palace over the years. Because he could see the mockery and disdain in her smile. It's true that I'm not a god. I'm just a human being, so sometimes I still have some human curiosity. For example, whether you're the son of Yama or what your intentions are in heading north to the wilderness. So I've been waiting to see who would appear to help you. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, Ning Ke once said something very strange by the Yanming Lake. Curiosity kills the cat. I don't understand it, but I know that curiosity can easily delay things. However, it is a pity that the level you have reached is not enough to delay me from killing you. Long Qing had an incredulous expression on his face. He said coldly, now I have 1,000 grassland warriors and 7 high priests here. How can you kill me? Yi Hongyu looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot and said, you are just 30 feet in front of me. Even if the Chanyu of the Golden Tribe leads his wolf cavalry here, how can they stop me from killing you, let alone the left king's palace? Long Qing said in shock, but after you kill me, how can you escape? Yi Hongyu said, my goal in coming to the West Hill is to kill you, not to escape. As long as I can kill you, does it matter whether I can escape or not? Such a simple sentence required a strong logic and a fearless will to be able to say it so calmly. Hearing this, Long Qing's expression suddenly froze. Yi Hongyu finally said, most importantly, if you become a meaningless corpse, what reason will the left king's palace have to keep me alive? Will these barbarians be so loyal that they will not hesitate to destroy their entire race to kill me, the great divine priest of West Hill? Long Qing, you are really stupid. Long Qing's face became abnormally pale because he knew that Yi Hongyu was right. If he died now, why would the left king's palace avenge him and fight against the great divine priest of judgment? He held on to the last hope and said, but they will not watch you kill me, because I am their last hope to survive and even grow in the wilderness. As if to prove Long Qing's judgment, the branches of the forest by the lake suddenly became chaotic. Several powerful auras that had already landed on the gravel ground instantly became more violent and attacked Yi Hongyu's body. Those auras contained the wild power of nature, and even faintly had the smell of some wild beasts in the wilderness. That was the unique spiritual attack of the grassland barbarian priests. Yi Hongyu's face was slightly pale. She looked at the forest coldly. A proud and domineering snort came from her thin lips. Almost at the same time, a painful muffled sound came from the distant forest. In the dark forest, a priest of the left king's palace, who was wearing an expensive fur coat and several kinds of bone celestial devices, sat down on the ground with a terrified expression. A very thin bone instrument on his body broke instantly, and 2 streams of black blood flowed from his nostrils. He was seriously injured. Yi Hongyu looked at the forest and felt the several spiritual auras. She disdainfully said, how dare you hurt me with the spiritual power? You are really brave and stupid. Before they met, a priest of the left king's palace had his sense of perception broken and his internal organs bleeding. The grassland priests in the forest looked at each other and saw the shock and fear in each other's eyes. The most shocking thing about Tao addict Yi Hongyu was that she was proficient in all kinds of arts. When she met a sword master, she was a more powerful sword master. When she met an array master, she was a better array master. When she met a psyche master, she was the most terrifying psyche master. Now that she had become the great divine priest of judgment, why would she be afraid of the spiritual power of these grassland priests? Yi Hongyu looked at Long Qing. The nether Taoist sword that she had snatched earlier had been thrown away. Now it was her Taoist sword that had been quietly hidden in the blood-red robe. It was her natal Taoist sword. The sword seemed to have no edge. It swam out of the robe and was as agile as a fish. However, it left a straight white line in the air. Long Qing looked desperate and smiled bitterly. However, at this moment, there was a loud bang. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky and hit the Taoist sword in the air without any deviation. After a while, the dull roar of thunder sounded in the sky. The sound lasted for an eternity. There was little rain in the cold autumn in the wilderness, and there was no rain today. However, there was thunder. Countless sky thunders struck the lake and the forest. It was deafening, the lake water was shaking, and the gravel ground by the lake was full of smoke and dust. After a long time, the thunder finally stopped. At this time, the sky became much gloomier. The smoke and dust in the sky seemed to float up and form thick black clouds, shrouding the lake and the mountain. Yi Hongyu took back her Taoist sword and looked up at the sky. Behind the black clouds, there was a faint flash of lightning. The will of heaven was unpredictable. The power of heaven was unpredictable. She looked at the sky in silence. No one knew what she was thinking. Long Qing was sent flying further away. He leaned against a rock. His burnt face was full of excitement and fanaticism. He coughed up blood and laughed loudly. He looked at Yi Hongyu, his face twisted. He shouted crazily, "I said that I am not a human. Naturally, I have the will of heaven. I am a person of the heavenly mandate. Look. Hao Tian did not abandon me. Yi Hongyu. As long as heaven does not kill me, what can you do to me?" Yi Hongyu did not care about Long Qing's crazy shouting. She looked up at the sky attentively, as if there was a beautiful scenery behind the clouds. She saw the scenery. Her expression was a little confused, and then it gradually returned to indifference. Then she saw a person on a cliff far away. The cliff was very high, so the person was also standing very high. He was so high that he could reach the clouds in the sky. The person had a Taoist bun and wore a light-colored Taoist robe. He carried a wooden sword. From the moment she saw the person on the cliff, Yi Hongyu stopped looking at the sky. She only had eyes for him. However, no matter how she looked, the person remained silent and did not move. Yi Hongyu's expression became more and more indifferent. There seemed to be a thin layer of frost on her eyebrows. Then she was unable to suppress her anger. This was the first time in her life that she was angry at the man with the wooden sword. She suddenly turned around and looked at Long Qing again. Her killing intent rose again. It was as if she had sensed something. The man on the cliff in the distance made a sound. The thick black clouds that seemed to be flowing slowly but were actually turbulent suddenly squeezed out more than 10 balls of light. They turned into more than 10 bolts of lightning and fell towards the blue lake again. The lightning came again. The boiling stones in the lake cracked uneasily. The aura of heaven and earth was torn into countless pieces. It turned into a terrible hurricane and violently passed through the gravel by the lake. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The blood-red divine robe of judgment danced in the wind. The figure did not fall. More than 1,000 grassland barbarians rushed out of the dense forest, but before they had time to approach the lake, they were shaken by the thunderbolts falling from the sky. The instinctive reverence for the sky made them kneel on the ground, constantly praying that God would forgive their sins. The 7 priests of the left king's palace in the dense forest were much calmer than the ordinary people. However, it was precisely because they could sense the majesty and power contained in the thunderbolts that they were actually more shocked than the ordinary people. When they saw the blood-red divine robe dancing in the wind and the figure stubbornly refusing to obey the lightning, the shock in their hearts finally reached its peak. He was indeed the legendary great divine priest of West Hill. He had such a terrible willpower and dared to fight with God. The wind and thunder gradually subsided. Yi Hongyu stood by the lake full of holes. Her figure looked a little lonely. She did not look at Long Qing anymore. Nor did she look at the figure on the cliff in the distance. She did not look at the scenery in the clouds. She did not look at the scenery of the lake and mountains. She did not look at anything. He just looked at himself, looked at his own shadow, and looked at it silently for a long time. She gave a loud shout. This shout was very clear and angry. In the quiet lake and mountains, it spread far and wide. This shout was full of unwillingness. A stream of blood slowly flowed from the corner of her mouth. In the forest, several priests of the left king's palace from the grassland were shocked by the terrible spiritual impact contained in this shout. They spat out blood and directly fell down, unconscious. Yi Su, who was standing on the cliff in the distance, heard this angry shout. He knew that her anger was directed at him. This was the first time in his life that his sister showed anger to him. She even faintly wanted to challenge him. Yi Su was not unhappy. He was very happy. He was so happy that he wanted to dance and shout to his heart's content. Because he knew that after seeing the real lightning today, she would no longer be the sister who looked at his back and wanted to get close to him. But she was always stubborn or self-abased and did not dare to open her mouth. From today on, she was Yi Hongyu. However, he still could not let her kill Long Qing. Because the Abbey Dean did not want the apostate to die. Yi Su looked up at the sky and the thick clouds that seemed to be within reach. He looked at the slowly accumulating bright lightning behind the clouds. He guessed that Haotian seemed to think the same way. Using the sword to attract lightning was the legendary state of sword Taoism. Yi Su realized something in the small Taoist temple in Chang'an. It seemed that he had made a big step forward on the road of cultivation. If it was in the past, Yi Hongyu would only be happy for her brother. However, today she felt very complicated. She was unwilling and angry. The most important question was, where did the clouds come from? After sitting on the seat of heavenly black jade and becoming the great divine priest of judgment, her heaven-man connection gradually deepened. When her gaze passed through the seemingly terrifying black clouds of thunder and saw the real scenery in the sky, she could faintly feel the will of Haotian. However, almost at the same time, she did not know whether it was because of unwillingness or anger, but she suddenly had the urge to fight. As the great divine priest of judgment, even if she occasionally had such a thought, it would be a great disrespect and the most serious sin. Yi Hongyu felt a slight uneasiness in her Taoist heart. She suddenly shivered and very valiantly escaped from that dangerous state of mind. She slowly lowered her head, and her black hair fluttered in the breeze. The lightning gradually subsided, and the clouds gradually dispersed. Not long after, they disappeared without a trace, and the clear autumn sky was revealed. Yi Hongyu did not think about the blasphemous thought that flashed through her mind. But how could she really erase the thought when it was born? Even if it was just a flash, it would definitely leave a mark in her mind. The clouds and thunder dispersed. She still lowered her head. In the deepest part of her heart, somewhere that she could not see, there seemed to be a voice indifferently saying, "This seems to be possible." After an unknown period of time, Yi Hongyu raised her head. "You are not allowed to return to the Central Plains without my permission." She looked at Long Qing and said calmly, "Otherwise, even if heaven can tolerate you, I will not let you live." Her blood-red clothes fluttered. She turned and left the blue lake. After Yi Hongyu left the capital of the kingdom of Qi, Ning Ke did not immediately leave with Sang Sang. First, he needed to repair the horse carriage that his master had left for him. Otherwise, although the journey was not long, they would not be able to continue. He now knew that the old red-robed priest from the Divine Hall of Light was called Shen Siyuan. He had already confirmed that the priest's loyalty to Sang Sang was far greater than his love for the academy. Therefore, he would certainly not miss the opportunity to use him to find the materials needed to repair the horse carriage and other things. With the help of such a noble person, Ning Ke also enjoyed the same treatment in the kingdom of Qi as he did in the Tang Empire. He could use almost all the rare materials in the West Hill vassal state. Usually, this white Daoist temple was extremely quiet, but now, it was occupied by all kinds of terrifying sounds. Iron hammers constantly pounded on the walls of the steel carriage, producing thunderous sounds. Sharp and hard tools repeatedly engraved talisman lines, and disgusting sounds similar to human abdominal rehearsals when rare metals were melted and poured. These sounds alternated and seemed to never stop. No matter how devoted the priest was, he could not read the scriptures. No matter how diligent the papal cavalryman was, he was not in the mood to practice martial arts. Even the wrinkles on Chen Cun's face were increasing rapidly. Fortunately, although Ning Ke was not as talented as the sixth brother in this aspect, he was still very amazing. It did not take long for the black horse carriage to be repaired to its original state. If one did not pay attention to the ugly scars on the walls of the carriage. When they left the capital of the kingdom of Qi, the red-robed priest Chen Cun sent a team of cavalrymen to escort them. Believing that there would be no problem, Ning Ke finally had the mood to enjoy the scenery outside the window. What really made him feel better was that someone was watching the scenery with him by the window. With Yi Hongyu's help, Sang Sang's condition was finally under control. She was no longer in a coma. Although she was still a little weak, she could at least enjoy the scenery or look at Ning Ke's face. These 6,000 words almost killed me. Fortunately, they are good. That's all for today. Although I will write more, I really don't know when I can finish them. It's even more likely that I won't be able to finish them tonight. That's why I have to say that there is no more for today. Everyone, please go to bed after reading. I said 10,000 per day, not 10,000 per day. Of course, I have to write more in the beginning. Otherwise, if I accumulate too much debt, I will really die. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 545. Sang Sang's condition was temporarily stabilized, and Ning Ke was most grateful to Yi Hongyu. He knew that the young divine priest of judgment should be on the way to kill Long Qing. Logically speaking, even if they were not friends, he should have expressed a certain degree of worry out of gratitude. But he did not. Ning Ke had absolute confidence in Yi Hongyu. The current Prince Long Qing was indeed very terrifying. In the Battle of Autumn Rain, if he had not been lucky, he would have died long ago. However, he still believed that Yi Hongyu was the most terrifying person among the younger generation of cultivators. Since she had said that she would kill Long Qing herself, then Long Qing would not be able to escape death. Looking at the autumn scenery outside the window, he recalled the bloody battle in the autumn rain, the ghostly figure of the fallen knight in front of the ruined temple, and Long Qing, who was wearing a black Taoist robe, suddenly overlapped with some scenes in his memory. After a while, he remembered that in his dreams, he had seen 3 black whirlwinds in the wilderness. The 3 black whirlwinds were cold and dark, as if they were a part of the night. Now that he thought about it carefully, it was really similar to the feeling that Long Qing and the fallen knight revealed. Ning Ke increasingly felt that what Long Qing had said that day might be true. The guy who learned to eat and loved to eat people was the son of Yama. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt that his state of mind was calmer. The faint fear of rumors about his origin and the Buddhism sect had naturally lessened. He was a little anxious about reaching the Lank Temple. No matter how anxious he was, the journey still needed to move a mile at a time. Especially since Sang Sang's body was weak, she could not bear to travel for a long time without rest, so the horse carriage did not speed up. The weather in the south was relatively warm and humid. It was late autumn, but the feeling of autumn was thick but not severe. There were many green trees on both sides of the road, which was much more pleasing to the eye compared to the desolate scenery in the north. Occasionally there would be an autumn rain, but it was getting colder day by day. Sang Sang's body became colder, especially her hands and feet, which felt as if they were made of ice. The warming effect of the liquor was getting shorter and shorter. Therefore, Ning Ke pasted the remaining failed fu paper with the warming effect on Sang Sang. He also made a brazier in the carriage. The fire fu, which was extremely precious in the eyes of cultivators, kept burning in the brazier day and night. No one knew how many fu papers were burned during the short journey. Ning Kei's psyche power could not withstand such extravagance and exaggeration no matter how powerful it was. His face became more and more haggard. Sang Sang did not dissuade him, because she knew it was meaningless and ineffective. If Ning Kei was sick, she would do the same thing, and Ning Kei would not dissuade her. She looked at the autumn scenery outside the window every day, or at Ning Kei's face by the window, with a calm smile on her face. For her, as long as the scenery was beautiful, even if the autumn wind and rain fell and the yellow leaves withered, as long as it was Ning Kei's face, even if it was haggard as if he had not slept for many days. Sang Sang looked at the scenery longer and longer, and the smile on her face became sweeter and sweeter. However, she spoke less and less. In the past few years, she did not speak much, but now she became more and more silent. She did not know if the elder of Lank Temple could cure her strange illness. She did not know if there was a future for her, and if there was, what kind of future it would be. The fear of not knowing was the reason for her silence. Ning Kei understood her feelings, but he did not say anything because he knew Sang Sang's temperament. Sang Sang, who seemed gentle but was actually stubborn, never liked to be comforted. That was because she and Ning Kei had risked their lives to survive all these years, so she knew that no matter what happened, she could not be weak. The weaker she was, the easier it would be for her to die. If she was moved by being comforted, that would be the beginning of her weakness. Ning Kei did not comfort her, but hugged her more tightly in his arms. He looked at the autumn scenery outside the window and stared blankly for a long time. In fact, this was good. They both felt as if they had returned to 10 years ago. Other than holding Sang Sang in his arms and staring blankly at the scenery, Ning Kei had been doing something else the rest of the time, especially when Sang Sang was asleep. That was to repair the primordial 13 arrows. There were special tools for repairing arrows in the arrow box. His hands were very steady, and the talisman carved on the iron arrow shaft was originally his, so the repair of the iron arrows went smoothly. Just as he was repairing the last iron arrow, there was a hubbub of voices coming from outside the carriage. Sang Sang lifted the curtains and looked forward. She saw several strangely shaped mountains among the hills in the south. The tops of the mountains were flat and looked like the black tiles on the eaves. They had arrived at Hua Mountain. In the world of Haotian, the Buddhism sect had been silent for thousands of years. They cultivated behind closed doors. Occasionally, they entered the human realm, but they were willing to be vassals of Haotian Taoism. Most of them were famous for their thinking and meditation. In the relationship between worshipping Buddha and worshipping heaven, many eminent monks directly believed that the fate wheel was just another way of expressing the will of Haotian. This statement made the Buddhism sect live in a low-key manner under the system of Haotian Taoism. It was so low-key that many predecessors wrote in their notes that the Buddhism sect was more of a way of thinking than anything else. Perhaps it was because of these various reasons that the Buddhism sect was not very prosperous in the world. Other than the sadhus in the countryside, it was extremely difficult to find a Buddhist temple in countries like the South Jin Kingdom. The only exception was the Yueluan Kingdom. That was because it was very close to the Xiankong Temple in the unknown place of the Buddhism sect in the depths of the wilderness. The Yueluan Kingdom was deeply influenced by the Buddhism sect, and cultivating Buddhism was extremely popular there. There were even descriptions of the 72 temples in the Misty Rain. However, the 72 temples in the Misty Rain could never surpass an ancient temple in the famous southeast. Whether it was the importance to the Buddhism sect or the position in the hearts of the believers, this ancient temple far surpassed the temples in the Yueluan Kingdom. This ancient temple was the Lank Temple. The Lank Temple was in the Tile Mountain. The Lank Temple had a very long history. According to the ancient records, not long after the West Hill Divine Palace was built, there were trees falling in the depths of the Tile Mountain. Pavilions were built, and pagodas and halls were gradually built. In the rumors of the cultivation world, the Lank Temple was the mountain gate left by the unknown place Xiankong Temple. It was similar to the relationship between the West Hill Divine Palace and the Jishou Abbey. Therefore, it was extremely respected and no one dared to violate the mountain gate. History and legends created the unique status of the Lank Temple. For countless years, no one knew how many tragic, solemn, or legendary stories were staged in this ancient temple. It was also because of this ancient temple that the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival gradually became the most important festival in the world. The most popular debate in decades also began here. It was not yet the day of the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, and the Tang Empire's diplomatic corps had not arrived yet. However, the Tile Mountain was already very lively. On the second floor of the houses on both sides of the Bluestone Street, all kinds of flags and banners were hung. The colors of the banners were very simple, mostly black and white. No one knew if they were a metaphor for the most popular game of chess around the Tile Mountain, or the real reason for the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, which was to expiate the souls of the underworld. It was believed that the ordinary monks in the Lank Temple and the residents who had lived in the town for dozens of generations did not know the origin of this custom. For the people living in the present world, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was just a simple and pure grand festival. All they needed to do was enjoy the festive atmosphere. There were already many tourists in the town at the foot of the Tile Mountain. No one knew where these tourists came from, but they all had the same happy smile on their faces. The adults greeted each other with a smile and enjoyed the scenery in the legendary 1,000-year-old houses. The children ran and chased each other on the street. A girl panted as she chased after her brother, her little face full of grievance. Suddenly, she saw hundreds of red fish in the stone pond by the side of the road. She immediately squatted down and stared at the calm swimming fish with her eyes wide open. She had long forgotten that she wanted to find her brother and cry. The middle-aged man standing by the stone pond looked at the girl and smiled. He handed her a thin wooden stick with a thin net the size of a teacup tied to the end of the stick. The girl looked at the people behind her who were fishing for money and shook her head shyly. She knew that fishing for fish required money, but her mother had said that she was too young to bring money with her. She could only leave it with her brother, but her brother had taken the money to buy sugar figurines. She did not know where he was now. The girl suddenly remembered that she was chasing after her brother. She screamed and stood up. Just as she was a little afraid, her brother, who was about 7 or 8 years old, squeezed out of the crowd and looked at her with a proud smile. Then, he took out 2 copper coins from his waist and stuffed them into her little hands. The red fish in the stone pond were no longer as peaceful. The water splashed and the moss on the side of the pond began to peel off. From time to time, the sigh of disappointment and the shouts of surprise from the brother and sister could be heard on the street. The black horse carriage stopped outside the town and did not enter. The cavalry of the Kingdom of Qi's National Palace had been driven away by Ning Quebec. Through the curtain, he and Sang Sang looked at the peaceful and happy town and the brother and sister who were squatting by the pond fishing for fish. They probably remembered the scene when they went to the market in the walled city when they were young and laughed. The Tile Mountain was not a single mountain, but several mountains connected. These mountains were still emitting a faint green color in the late autumn. They were very similar in shape, and their peaks were flat as if they were cut by a knife. From afar, they looked like several black tiles that had been casually put together by a naughty child. While the town was very lively, the depths of the Tile Mountain were still so quiet. The corner of the ancient temple loomed in the forest, as if it was influenced by Buddhism. The last chirping of the southern autumn cicadas did not sound sad and desperate, but indifferent. This was the back of the mountain. If they wanted to go to the Lank Temple, they would never be able to reach the main hall from this mountain path. But the black horse carriage was slowly moving up the mountain path. Ning Ke did not bring Sang Sang to the Tile Mountain to go to the Lank Temple. He wanted to go to the back of the mountain to find someone. In the secluded mountain behind the Lank Temple, there lived several generations of Buddhist Vedanta who had lived in seclusion. Ning Ke was looking for one of them. It was the elder of the Lank Temple whom he had heard of countless times. Try to finish the next chapter before 10:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 546. There were many elders in the Lank Temple. Some were in charge of discipline, and some were in charge of the Zen Temple. When Long Qing had shown his brilliance in the debate, he had been appreciated by one of the elders. However, there was only one real elder in this ancient temple. Or rather, there was only one elder who could let the listener know who he was talking about without any prefixes. Elder Qishan was the most senior person in the Xiankong Temple, and even in the entire cultivation world. He was older than Kuni Mati, and was even older than the West Hill Hierarch. Other than the special academy, most people in the world had to greet him as a disciple. No one knew how old this Vedanta of the Buddhism sect was. Some people inferred that he was over 100 years old from the famous conversation between him and the West Hill Divine Palace Hierarch. Interestingly, the topic of the famous conversation was that Elder Qishan and the Hierarch Lord guessed the headmaster's age. It was rumored in the cultivation world that Elder Qishan was the illegitimate son of the former chief preaching monk of the Xiankong Temple. Of course, no one dared to ask him for confirmation, or even mention it. So the rumors were always rumors. However, the reason why Elder Qishan was respected by the entire cultivation world was not only because of his seniority or his respectable background, but also because of his noble character. Decades ago, the south of the mainland encountered a terrible flood. The river roared and overflowed, and the turbid waves submerged countless fertile fields. The dikes of various countries broke one after another, and the water flowed into the Great Lake. The situation was extremely dangerous. Master Qishan, who was still the abbot of the Lank Temple, led the monks out of the Hua Mountain with dozens of carriages of food and medicine that had been accumulated over the years. He gave out porridge and medicine along the way, and saved countless victims. Master Qishan became ill from overworking, and was infected with corpse poison when he was dealing with the victims' bodies. He almost died of a serious illness. The Great Lake, which contained countless rivers, was gradually unable to hold on, especially the dike in Kangzhou of the South Jin Kingdom. It was on the verge of collapse one night. Master Qishan was in Kangzhou at that time. Seeing the situation, he did not care about his serious illness. He took off his monk's robe and jumped into the lake. With unimaginable cultivation state and willpower, he stood in front of the collapsing dike for an entire night. The next morning, the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom and the West Hill Divine Palace's Divine Talisman Masters arrived in Kangzhou. The situation eased, and Master Qishan finally walked out of the turbid waves. He fell unconscious as soon as he landed. The most important thing during that year's flood was that night, the long night when Master Qishan replaced the dike with his own body. Kangzhou and the South Jin Kingdom's most important farmland behind the Long Dike were fortunately saved. This meant that the entire South Jin Kingdom and even half of the mainland were saved. After that night, Master Qishan's name shook the world. Whether it was the willpower he had displayed or the powerful state of his cultivation, everyone was in awe of him. However, he had also paid a heavy price for this. The amazing power that he had cultivated for decades in the Lank Temple had been used up. He had been severely injured. Even if he were to cultivate again after he recovered, he would never be able to return to his peak state. In the legends of the cultivation world, Master Qishan should have been recognized as the most promising grand cultivator to break through the 5 states before the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai. He might even be able to transcend the mortal world and become a saint. Unfortunately, since then, he had no choice but to stay outside the threshold forever, unable to touch the realm above the mortal world. The cultivation world and the billions of people in the world remembered Master Qishan's great kindness. Their respect for him did not decrease, but became more sincere. Even decades later, it was still the same. When Master Lian Xing of the Kingdom of Song lost his wife, he wrote a mourning essay on a rainy night and began to travel around the world. He came to the Tile Mountain and stayed at the Lank Temple. When he was sleeping in the back hall, he heard an old monk talking about Buddhism and understood Buddhism. That old monk was Master Qishan. A few years later, Lian Xing returned from the western wilderness. He was enlightened by the Xiankong Temple and refused the invitation of the West Hill Divine Palace. He stroked his hair in front of an old monk and officially entered Buddhism. That old monk was also Master Qishan. After that, Lian Sheng lived in seclusion in the back mountain of the Lank Temple for 2 years. At that time, his cultivation state had far surpassed that of Master Qishan. However, he respected Master Qishan very much. During the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, the Devil's Doctrine massacred the Lank Temple and killed all the cultivators of the right path. However, they did not hurt the monks in the temple. Now that he thought about it, it must be because of Master Qishan. Ning Ke did not bring Sang Sang to the Lank Temple to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. He was not here to discuss the desolate man's invasion of the south on behalf of the Tang Empire. It had nothing to do with the legend of the underworld invasion. He was here to cure his illness. The person he was looking for was Master Qishan. The black horse carriage stopped in front of the mountain road. Ning Ke looked at the looming temple in the forest and the stone Buddha statue on the stone platform at the back of the tile mountain. He thought of Master Qishan and felt a little strange. He, who had inherited the fragments of consciousness after Lian's death, could clearly feel that the elder of the Lank Temple who had lived in seclusion for decades was an extraordinary person. Truly great people naturally had their own unique traits. Ning Ke did not know what Master Qishan liked or disliked. Logically speaking, a virtuous predecessor of the Buddhism sect should be kind and gentle. However, Ning Ke still cautiously reminded himself to maintain enough respect and be prepared for it. How could he keep a low profile? What kind of preparations should he make? He had made some changes to the black horse carriage. It still looked black, but it had become much dirtier. There was a hint of grease on it and it actually looked like a big black umbrella. The big black horse was also covered in dirt by him. He even smeared a few large patches of brown tree sap on its body. The big black horse no longer looked as cool as it did in the wilderness. It looked extremely embarrassed. This was the preparation Ning Ke had made. Anyway, he was prepared to come as miserable as it looked. He had even prepared a handkerchief with ginger juice and a small leather pouch filled with blood. He planned to use the powder from Chenjinji Cosmetics store to make Sang Sang's little face even paler before seeing Master Qishan. After seeing Master Qishan, he would use the handkerchief to make his eyes red and squeeze the blood pouch to pretend to cough up blood. He did not believe that the Vedanta of the Buddhism sect could bear to ignore it. Who would dare to be more miserable than him? If someone dared to be more miserable than him and Sang Sang, he would probably really make that person miserable. At this moment, a young monk slowly walked up the mountain road. The monk's face was dark and his expression was calm. However, when he saw the broken black horse carriage and the big black horse at the entrance of the mountain road, the calmness on his face was immediately shattered into countless pieces of shock and then fell to the ground. He walked to the front of the horse carriage and looked at Ning Ke through the window. He said helplessly, "How can you hide this from my master? My master is not this kind of person. Does he need Mr. 13 to spend so much effort? There is one more chapter. I will try to finish it before 12:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 547. The dark-skinned young monk, whose Buddhist name was Guan Hai, was the last disciple of the Lank Temple's elder, Master Qishan. He did not have any specific duties in the temple, but his seniority and status were extremely high, comparable to that of the abbot. Last winter, it was Guan Hai who personally went to Chang'an and handed the invitation to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival to Ning Quebec. He also challenged him. Ning Ke sat by the Yenming Lake for half a day and finally understood something. Then he returned to the South Gate Taoism Hall to fight with him and narrowly won. Ning Ke had a good impression of Monk Guan Hai. Although this young monk had a determined temperament, he was extremely gentle and amiable. Monk Guan Hai had a longing for the academy and respected the disciples of the second floor of the academy because his teacher had once consulted the headmaster of the academy and constantly praised him. This is indeed the Lank Temple's territory. I wanted to keep a low profile and not disturb you. I secretly met Master Chishan and left after finishing my business. But you still found out. Ning Ke walked out of the horse carriage and looked at Guan Hai with a smile. Monk Guan Hai looked at the dusty horse carriage and said with a bitter smile, "You are not low profile. I received a letter from the Divine Hall a few days ago and knew that you were attacked on the way." Uncle, when did you break the realm again?" Monk Guan Hai suddenly felt that something had happened to Ning Quebec. It was very different from when they met in Cheng and last winter. He vaguely guessed the truth and could not help but exclaim. Ning Ke said, "I told you in Cheng and to call me senior brother." Monk Guan Hai hesitated for a moment and listened to his request. He said, 13th senior. "Brother, when we met last year, you were still in the see-through state. How did you break the realm in such a short time? Did you have an adventure again?" As a Buddhist disciple, his temperament was calm and determined. Moreover, Monk Guan Hai's state was quite high. But at this moment, his voice was slightly trembling. Ning Ke said, "How can there be so many adventures? If you can often leave the Tile Mountain and the Lank Temple to fight with people in the world, it will not be so difficult to increase your state." Monk Guan Hai looked at him with envy and awe. The cultivation world knew that Ning Ke had only been in the academy for a few years, but now he had become a grand cultivator of the knowing destiny state. It was really shocking. Although it was a great pleasure to be looked at by a young Buddhist master, Ning Ke did not have the time and energy to enjoy it. He said, "I wrote you a letter in advance. Did you read it?" Guan Hai looked at the black horse carriage and said, "Yes." "How is your senior sister?" Guan Hai looked at the black horse carriage and said, "Yes." "How is she?" Then he said worriedly, "I asked Yi Hongyu to help me suppress the cold aura in my body. It shouldn't worsen for a while, but it's better to solve this as soon as possible. When can I see Master Chishan?" Monk Guan Hai looked embarrassed and said, "My master builds a hut and meditates in the mountain behind the temple all year round. He does not receive guests." Guan King is, and said, "Master of is, Guan Guan Guan." Monk Guan Hai shook his head and explained, "In the past, my master never attended the Grand Guan Tian King festival. Even when I was cultivating Buddhism with my master, I only listened to his teachings through the door." Ning Ke raised his eyebrows when he heard this. If he did not meet with guests, then what was the point of him coming? He had made up his mind. If that was the case, he would have to force his way into the mountain. At this moment, Monk Guan Hai said, "But my master will come out of seclusion for a day." Ning Ke's raised eyebrows calmed down. He looked at Monk Guan Hai and said helplessly, "You are a monk from the Tile Mountain, not a storyteller from Cheng'an. Can you not speak with such a big breath?" Monk Guan Hai smiled apologetically and suggested, "My master will come out of seclusion the day after tomorrow. 13th brother, why don't you stay in the temple for 2 days? Even though it can't be compared to the academy, there is still some scenery." Ning Ke thought that Sang Sang's condition had stabilized recently, and she had been enjoying the scenery on the horse carriage. Since they had come all the way to the Lank Temple, he should take her around. He should at least see what the 1,000-year-old temple looked like, especially since he was a disciple of the academy and close to Mistress Jian. He should pay his respects to the tomb in the temple. That's good. He thought of a question and asked Monk Guan Hai, "Since Master Chishan has been in seclusion for many years, why did he come to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival this year? I know that the imperial courts of the Central Plains are here to discuss the desolate man's invasion. The cultivation sects might be here because of the legend of the underworld invasion." Monk Guan Hai thought of something and looked at Ning Ke with a complicated gaze. He said, "Maybe so." Ning Ke understood what the young monk was thinking and asked with a smile, "It is said that I am the son of Yama. Are you afraid of standing in front of me?" Monk Guan Hai's gaze returned to peace. He looked at Ning Ke with a smile and said, "What is there to be afraid of?" Ning Ke saw that his expression did not seem to be fake and could not help but feel puzzled. He asked, "Why?" Monk Guanhai bowed to the west with his palms pressed together. Then he straightened up and looked at Ning Ke seriously. He said, "Since the headmaster of the academy is willing to accept you as his core disciple, how can you be the son of Yama?" For the sake of peace, Ning Ke did not stay in the Lank temple in the end. Monk Guanhai brought them to a secluded courtyard near the forest in the north. They did not disturb the monks in the temple. After a simple vegetarian meal and a simple chat, Monk Guanhai stood up and left. Ning Ke knew that although Master Qishan lived in seclusion all year round, Guanhai, as the future abbot of the Lank temple, had to come out to receive the other cultivation sects during the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Therefore, Ning Ke did not ask him to stay. As dusk approached, there was the sound of drums not far away. Then, it was night. A servant in the temple boiled hot water. Ning Ke warmed Sangsang's feet and put her to sleep. He changed a few talismans on her body and then lay down beside her with a peace of mind. When he woke up, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The bell of the Lank temple rang again. He quietly listened to the rhythmic yet unrhythmic sound of the bell, which seemed dull but was actually quite refreshing. He felt much calmer. After breakfast, Ning Ke let the big black horse play in the forest in the courtyard. He put a thick fur coat on Sangsang and took her through an iron gate in the south of the courtyard into the back garden of the Lank temple. The monks in the temple should be doing their morning prayers. There was no other movement in the back garden except for the diligent birds that woke up early to survive and the insects that woke up early to survive but were unfortunately devoured. A faint fog permeated the forest. The main hall and a few side halls of the Lank temple in the distance were faintly discernible in the fog. They looked extremely solemn and beautiful, as if the Buddhist land had really come to the human world. Ning Ke was not too interested in the scenery of the ancient temple. His eyes were fixed on the pagoda forest in the fog. This pagoda forest was made up of dozens of stone pagodas. Each stone pagoda enshrined the ashes of a powerful senior from the Buddhism sect. Logically speaking, such an environment would make people feel gloomy and scary. However, the chanting coming from the main hall in the distance calmed everything down. The pagoda forest was quiet and the paths were complicated. Walking in it was like walking in a maze. If it was a first-time visitor, it would be easy to get lost. However, he walked in it with Sangsang without any pause or hesitation. It was extraordinarily familiar, as if he had been here many times. Sangsang raised her head and looked at him. She was a little surprised and puzzled. Ning Ke did not notice it himself. Even if he did, he would think that it was because he was too familiar with the map that eldest brother had drawn for him before he left. He probably would not have thought that it was because of the remnant consciousness of Lotus in the depths of his spiritual ocean that was guiding him. Walking to the northwest of the pagoda forest, he saw a tomb beside a moss-covered stone pagoda. The tomb was very ordinary and inconspicuous. However, in the pagoda forest where the remains of the Buddhism sect were enshrined in the Lank temple, there was a very ordinary tomb. It was already very eye-catching and vaguely revealed an unusual feeling. Ning Ke held Sangsang's hand and walked to the tomb. He noticed that there were some traces of moss on the tomb, but it looked very clean. It must have been taken care of frequently. He was satisfied and his impression of the monks in the temple improved a little. He bowed deeply to the tomb. There was no tombstone in the tomb. However, he knew who was buried in the tomb. Buried in the tomb was a young woman. At least when she died, the woman was still very young. That woman was once the best dancer in the world and had a very simple name. The person buried in the tomb was Jian Xiaoxiao, the elder sister of Mistress Jian from the House of Red Sleeves, the fiancée of the youngest uncle from the academy. If she had not been killed by Lotus, she would have been my youngest aunt. Youngest uncle might still be alive now and even have a few children with her. The youngest of them would have taken the glorious position of youngest brother and fought with Chen Pippi for the honor of being the most talented. Ning Ke looked at the tomb, which had been cleaned often but had not been visited for many years. He smiled with mixed feelings and said in a low voice, "There will be a few more ancestors in the academy." "But there are already many ancestors in the academy. I think the teacher won't mind having a few more." Sang Sang squatted down and reached out to pick up a leaf that had floated to the tomb last night. No one knew what she was thinking at this moment. She felt a little cold and subconsciously tightened the collar of her fur coat. Ning Ke held her in his arms and looked at the tomb in front of him. He could not help but feel touched when he thought of the beautiful woman who had danced in front of the Lang temple and had died so miserably in the end. Logically speaking, as a disciple of the academy, I should hate Liansheng very much. Even if I am cold-blooded and have never been harmed by Liansheng, and have inherited some of his benefits, I cannot hate him. But as the only survivor of the murder in the general's mansion, why can't I hate your teacher? Sang Sang's headmaster was the former great divine priest of light, Wei Guangming. The former half of Ning Ke's life was full of despair and an abnormal desire for revenge. But now he said that he did not hate that person. I don't even hate Xiaohou now. Or it is hard to think of this person. He frowned and kept thinking. He murmured, "Am I really so cold-blooded?" "Not because you are cold-blooded, but because they are all dead." Sang Sang nestled in his arms and looked at the tomb. She said, "Everything will disappear with death." Hate a person and love a person, no matter how strong, will gradually forget. Ning Ke knew what she wanted to say, but he did not want to hear it. "I don't have anything today. Tomorrow I will go to Harbin to attend a friend's wedding. But I will not stop updating." Ahem, maybe that's it. Alas, if this continues, I will really die in a few days. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 548. That was the first rain after the drought in Hebei province. The rain was very cold. When Ning Ke found the baby girl under the pile of corpses, she was blue and purple all over and was about to die from hunger and cold. Since that rain, Ning Ke had been hiding many psychological shadows in his heart. As Sang Sang was seriously ill and on the verge of death, the shadows became heavier and heavier and he hid them deeper and deeper. As time went by, Sang Sang's illness became less and less frequent. Although the military doctor in the stronghold could not completely cure the cold qi in her body, he still prescribed some symptomatic medicine. Other than making sure that she was accompanied by liquor and doing housework, Ning Ke had almost forgotten about this matter. Especially after Sang Sang began to cultivate the divine skills of West Hill Taoism, the cold aura in her body was like the thin snow in spring. Ning Ke had thought that she had completely recovered. However, who would have thought that Sang Sang would suddenly fall ill again, and this time, it was even more dangerous than when she was a child. The shadow hidden in the depths of Ning Ke's heart rose again. During the journey, he thought hard and worried. Even the headmaster could not cure Sang Sang's illness. Could the Lang temple really cure her? Was Sang Sang's illness really just an illness, or was there destined to be a cold future waiting for the two of them? Because of these psychological shadows, Ning Ke had never discussed that with Sang Sang since she was very young. At this time, Sang Sang seemed to want to say something, but he did not want to hear it. Sang Sang wanted to say it. "Young master, do you know why I have been staring at you recently?" For some reason, Sang Sang began to call him young master again. Ning Ke smiled and said, "Because I am good-looking." Sang Sang said, "You are not the old Prince Long Qing. You are not worth being stared at." Ning Ke was slightly angry and said, "I said not to mention this." Sang Sang knew that he was pretending to be angry to hide something. She said softly, "You know the reason." Ning Ke knew the reason, but he did not want to say it. At this time, he looked like a little boy in a fit of pique. He was stubborn, naive, childish, easily angered, and even cried easily. At this time, Sang Sang was like a gentle and sensible big sister. She looked at him quietly and said in a gentle voice, I am worried that I will never see you again after I die. Ning Kei's body trembled slightly when he finally heard the word from her mouth. Looking at the grave in front of them, Sang Sang curiously asked, where do people go after they die? Whether I turn into ashes or rot, I'm sealed by the stone bricks. But is that still me? Ning Kei did not want her to stay in this kind of mood for a long time, because this kind of mood or thinking was very unhealthy for a seriously ill person. He wanted to change the topic, but he could not. Some say that death is nothingness. Some say that after death, one will go to the netherworld. I'd rather go to the netherworld. Sang Sang looked at him and said seriously, the underworld sounds terrible, but I can wait for you there. Looking at her pale face, Ning Kei untied his coat and put it on her shoulders. He said in a low voice, people in the underworld will forget what happened in this world. You won't remember me then, so don't go. What does death feel like? Sang Sang looked at him and asked. There was no sadness or fear on her face, only curiosity, just like a child. She was very thin and small. Wearing Ning Kei's coat, she indeed looked like a child who had stolen an adult's clothes to wear. It looked a little funny, but it also showed a rare sense of cuteness. Your face is a little pale from the cold. Hurry up and go back. Ning Kei said. At this time, although it was late autumn, it was not very cold around the Lang temple. Sang Sang's little face was a little pale, but it was not because of the cold, but because of the cold aura in her body. Sang Sang was very clear about this. She stretched out her hands in front of Ning Quebec. Ning Kei was startled. He thought of many years ago, when Sang Sang was still a little girl and sometimes acted like a spoiled child. He felt a pain in his heart and blew a few warm breaths into her palms. Sang Sang took back her slightly warm hands and touched both sides of her cheeks. She said with some regret, young master, you always said that I was an ugly girl. I know that I was indeed born black. You always said that whiteness can cover all ugliness, so I always wanted to make myself whiter. After coming to Chang'an, I spent so much money to buy cosmetics from Chenjinji Cosmetics store, but it was all in vain. Now that I'm really white, I can't make you happy. Ning Kei hugged her tighter and said, no matter if you are black or white, as long as you can be as greedy and fierce as before, you can make young master happy. Hearing this, Sang Sang smiled happily, revealing 2 white teeth. She looked like a small animal in the forest of Min Mountain. She was very cute. Now Sang Sang was especially cute, often cute. That was because she used to think that there was no need to play cute in front of Ning Kei, and she didn't need to play cute in front of others. But now she wanted Ning Kei to think that she was cute. You haven't answered my previous question. What question? What does death feel like? I've never died. How would I know? Do you want me to dig youngest aunt out from the grave and let her tell you? Ning Kei made a tasteless joke and then realized that it was really not funny. He looked down at a dead autumn insect in the grass under his feet. After a long silence, he said, actually, I do know. Death is a very uncomfortable thing, so don't die. Sang Sang looked at him and said seriously, yes, I will try not to die. Ning Kei touched her head and said, let's work hard together. In the misty forest, a drop of water suddenly fell, followed by several drops of water. The water drops were very small, even as fine as powder. They fell on his face and eyes, making them a little wet. Ning Kei said, let's go back. Sang Sang shook her head and said, I still want to walk around. Ning Kei said, your body can't stand the rain now. Sang Sang untied the big black umbrella from her back and said, it's hard even if I want to. Ning Kei smiled and opened the big black umbrella. He held her hand and walked to the front hall of the Lang temple. In the morning, it began to rain in the Lang temple. The mist gradually dissipated, and the looming eaves and pagodas in the mist became clear. The Buddhist land had returned to the human world. Ning Ke looked at the ancient temple in the light autumn rain and saw a Buddha statue on the top of the mountain behind the temple. The material used to carve the Buddha statue should be some kind of precious white hard stone. The carving was simple but smooth. At this time, the rain fell on the peaceful face of the Buddha statue, like tears, adding a bit of pity. Even at such a distance, the face of the Buddha statue could still be seen clearly. One could imagine how huge the Buddha statue was. When the believers looked up at it from the foot of the mountain, it was easy to feel a sense of worship. He pointed to the giant Buddha at the top of the mountain and said, "It is said that this is the Buddha who founded the Buddhism sect." Sang Sang looked at him and asked, "Do you want to worship it? If you don't go up the mountain, you can worship it from afar. The Buddha is a human, and so am I. The Buddha has read the Ming hand scroll, and so have I. Why should I worship him?" There were faint sounds of people and wheels coming from the main hall. It was still early in the morning, and the Lank Temple did not receive visitors. So they must be official envoys or representatives of cultivation sects staying in the temple like Ning Quebec. Ning Ke did not pay attention to these people and said, "Of course, if the Buddha can really show his spirit and cure your illness, why don't I worship him for 3 days and 3 nights after that?" Suddenly, a voice came from the main hall. "You need to be sincere to ask the Buddha to cure you. Do you think the Buddha is a doctor that you can find anywhere? If you are not sincere enough, even if the Buddha can cure your wife's illness, he will not cure her." A few luxurious carriages came from the main hall of the Lank Temple. The voice that was full of blame and arrogance came from one of the carriages. Ning Ke had thought that only the people from the Yueluan kingdom who believed in Buddhism would say something like that. However, when his gaze fell on the luxurious carriages, he was surprised to find that they were from the South Jin kingdom. Even though it was raining in autumn, it was still a little arrogant to drive a carriage in the quiet ancient temple. Since they were staying in the temple, they must not be ordinary people. Looking at the carriages, Ning Ke thought that if the people in the carriages were not from the South Jin kingdom, they must be disciples of the sword Garrett. No matter who they were not people he wanted to see now. The carriage that had made the sound stopped not far from Ning Ke and Sang Sang. The curtains were lifted, revealing a pale but handsome young face. The young man looked at Ning Ke and said unhappily, "In a Buddhist temple, you should worship the Buddha. If you don't even know this, I don't know why the monks in the temple let you stay." Ning Ke asked, "Do you know me?" The young man said mockingly, "Do I need to know you?" Ning Ke said, "I thought you recognized me, so you deliberately said this for me to hear. Then you sincerely apologized to me and finally achieved your goal of getting to know me." Hearing this, the young man was stunned for a while before he understood what Ning Ke wanted to say. He asked in disbelief, "You mean I deliberately approached you?" Ning Ke smiled and said, "Recently, many people have indeed thought of many strange ways to get to know me. I thought you deliberately flirted with me with the same idea, but I didn't expect that to be the case." His calm words hid a very mean sense of ridicule. Ning Ke had been feeling uneasy since Sang Sang's illness. After the battle in the Red Lotus Temple, he was even more depressed because of those very strange things. Although the joy of breaking through the knowing destiny state was slightly alleviated, he still needed a channel or an outlet to vent. At this moment, he saw the carriages and heard the sound coming from the carriage. The young man was furious. He pointed at Ning Ke through the window and scolded coldly, "Who do you think you are?" Hearing this, Ning Ke was very happy. He tilted his head and clamped the big black umbrella on his shoulder. Then, he began to roll up his sleeves. At this moment, a hand appeared from the window and forcefully pulled the young man back. Ning Ke felt very disappointed. He thought to himself, "Who is so boring and insensible? If you don't drink too much tonight, I will write some more. But I guess it will be too high. But, okay, forget what I said. Let me die." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 549. The hand in the carriage window only appeared in Ning Kei's sight for a very short time, but it was enough for him to clearly see some features of the hand: the slender and stable fingers, the soft and wide palm, and the thin calluses. It was a hand suitable for holding a sword, and the calluses also seemed to prove that this hand often held the hilt. Ordinary sword masters in the cultivation world all used flying swords, except for one sect. Coincidentally, that famous sect was located in the South Jin Kingdom. It was the sword garret founded by the sage of sword, Liu Bai. Because of these inferences, Ning Kei vaguely guessed the origin of the hand. So he seemed to be extremely regretful, but in fact, he was secretly vigilant. A voice rang out in the luxurious carriage, presumably from the owner of the hand. The voice was calm and gentle, and he apologized to Ning Kei on behalf of the young man. Ning Kei listened to the apology and sensed the calmness in the man's voice. Although his expression did not change, he was a little shocked. Although he had guessed that the man was from the sword garret, he did not expect that he was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. What was more difficult for him to understand was that a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state would show such weakness. The powerhouse from the sword garret in the carriage apologized sincerely and gently. Ning Kei could feel the kindness and sincerity that he wanted to convey. Especially after confirming that he was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state, the kindness and sincerity increased many times in a very short period of time. Sang Sang was in the ancient Lang temple, and she needed to be treated by the monks of the Buddhism sect. Ning Kei did not want to make things unmanageable. Seeing the sincere apology, he waved his hand to signal that it was over. After a moment of silence in the carriage, the sincere and kind voice of the powerhouse from the sword garret sounded again. "My young master was indeed rude. But since you are here to worship Buddha, it is good to be more sincere." Though this advice was well-intentioned, it was difficult to repress a hint of instruction. Ning Kei thought that the man was after all a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state, so he was not surprised by the tone of his words. He shook his head and said, "You people in the South Jin Kingdom worship Haotian, but you come here to worship Buddha. Buddha may not be very happy. I am the same. I have never worshipped Buddha before, and now that there is a problem, Buddha may not believe me no matter how sincere and respectful I am. In this case, why should I care about my attitude?" The powerhouse from the sword garret sighed in the carriage, as if he was a little sorry to hear such an answer from Ning Quebec. He said goodbye, and several carriages slowly moved to the East Side Hall. The Yulon Hungry Ghost Festival was a grand event in the world. Many bigwigs would gather in the Lank Temple in this autumn. Especially in a few days, they might meet a famous bigwig in the cultivation world. Ning Kei did not care too much about this encounter, even though he had guessed that young man's real identity. The autumn rain became heavier and fell on the surface of the big black umbrella. Although the rain did not penetrate through the umbrella and wet them, the temperature in the temple became lower and lower. Ning Kei took Sang Sang's hand and prepared to go back to the yard to rest. Before leaving, he glanced at the top of the Wa mountain in the distance. The Buddha stone statue was quietly watching the world under the mountain. Its face, wet by the rain, looked more and more compassionate, as if it was sympathizing with the people who were trapped in the trap of life, death, sickness, and aging. If what Buddha said is true, and there is a cycle of karma in the world, then I have done many evil things in my life. I don't think I will get any good retribution. But I have been very careful not to stain Sang Sang's hands with too much blood. I have really tried my best. Even if there is retribution, it will only be on me, not on her. Ning Kei looked at the Buddha statue in the autumn rain and prayed devoutly. If you insist on taking your anger out on her because of my evil deeds, or even let her leave, I will destroy your biggest stone statue in the world. I will burn the Lank Temple and the 72 temples of the Yueluan Kingdom. I will kill all the monks in the world and destroy your Buddhism sect. Several luxurious horse carriages from the South Jin Kingdom quietly stopped in front of a side hall of the Lank Temple. Several middle-aged men with sharp eyes looked around coldly, protecting the master of the hall. There were also a few people who looked like officials. They were sheltering from the rain in the corridor in front of the hall, but they did not enter the hall. The side hall of the Buddhist temple became darker in the rain. There were more than 10 stone statues of venerables in the hall, emitting a faint cold light. These statues were either smiling or sad. Their hands were exposed in the air, some were pressed together, and some were spread out. Their movements were different, revealing a wonderful sense of beauty and solemnity. A middle-aged man in a green robe stopped in front of these stone statues and looked at them. His hands were slender and steady behind his back. He was the powerhouse from the sword garret who had spoken in the carriage earlier. Looking at these stone statues, he sighed and said, "The Lank Temple, the Yueluan White Tower Temple, and the Wanyan Tower Temple in Chang, and all worship these stone statues of venerables. It is said that people with innate wisdom can see the true meaning of the emblematic gestures of Buddhism from these stone statues. Unfortunately, I can only feel the existence of the wisdom, but not understand it." The side hall was silent. The face of the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom who had reprimanded Ning Ke was very ugly. Although he could not say anything to the powerhouse from the sword garret, he could not control his emotions. He was very displeased that the man had apologized for him to Ning Ke, which made him feel extremely humiliated. The middle-aged man looked at the gloomy face of the nobleman and sighed in his heart. He slowly comforted him. There are many hidden talents in the cultivation world. What's more, the Lank Temple is holding the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Those strange people who rarely step into the human world may also appear. Although the South Jin Kingdom is not afraid of them, why should we provoke these troubles? Accompanying the nobleman to visit the Lank Temple was a gray-haired old man. Looking at his hunched body, he should be an ordinary person. He strangely held a chessboard under his armpit, and his expression was very cold and arrogant. This old man was the national champion of the South Jin Kingdom and was also known as the chess sage. He had rarely lost in chess and could enter and leave the palace without any restrictions. That was why he had developed an arrogant temperament. Thinking of the nobleman's identity, he thought that he would not be afraid of trouble, so he said unhappily, "Mr. Cheng is the junior brother of the sword sage. Why would he be afraid of these small troubles?" And from the accent of the young man with the black umbrella, "He is a Tang, so we should not avoid him." The young nobleman thought that this was the truth. He looked at the middle-aged man and wanted to hear his explanation. The middle-aged man's name was Cheng Zicheng, and he was one of the few powerhouses in the knowing destiny state in the sword garret. Naturally, he did not care about the old man's attitude, and even ignored the young nobleman's gaze. He explained indifferently, "Master Qishan has done a great favor for the South Jin Kingdom. If he really causes trouble in the Lank Temple, neither my senior brother nor His Majesty will be happy." His Majesty was naturally the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, and his senior brother was naturally the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai. Now that Cheng Zicheng had invited these two people, the side hall immediately returned to silence, and no one dared to object. Cheng Zicheng walked out of the side hall and found a young official of the South Jin Kingdom who was sheltering from the rain in the corridor. He signaled him to follow him to a secluded place with his eyes. Looking at the young official's slightly pale face, he asked, "Is it him?" The young official's name was Xia Qingyun. He was the famous third young master Xia of the South Jin Kingdom in the past. Later, after Ning Ke's success in the second-floor examination of the academy, the third young master Xia left the academy and returned to the South Jin Kingdom. With the reputation of being a young Tanhua, it did not take long for him to have his own position in the imperial court of the South Jin Kingdom. This year, the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom appointed him as a close subordinate of His Highness the Crown Prince. Hearing Cheng Zicheng's question, Xia Qingyun nodded with a somewhat complicated expression. Cheng Zicheng was speechless. In fact, when he saw the big black umbrella and the young man and woman under it, he had vaguely guessed their identities. When the young man also showed an indifferent attitude towards the Buddhism sect, he knew that his guess was right. He understood that it was the right choice to apologize on behalf of His Highness. If His Highness knew who the young man under the big black umbrella was, he would definitely not let it go. Today, the Lank Temple would definitely be in trouble. Even though he had entered the knowing destiny state, he did not want to have a dispute with that young man. Although he was not afraid of him, he did not want to offend him and the powerful and invincible sect behind him. Qing Ziqing pondered for a while and looked at him, saying, Master Qishan will open his hut tomorrow, and Ning Ke will definitely appear. So you have to keep an eye on His Highness. Even if His Highness knows Ning Ke's identity, you can't make him angry. Xia Qingyun understood what Qing Ziqing was worried about. After a little hesitation, he agreed. However, having been a subordinate of the prince's mansion for half a year, he was very clear about the temperament of His Highness the Crown Prince whom he would serve for a lifetime. Naturally, he knew how difficult it was to make His Highness not angry. Suddenly, he thought of a possibility. Looking at Qing Ziqing's face, he forced himself to pluck up his courage and said softly, I heard that the Sage of Swords' younger brother was blinded by that person. Qing Ziqing's eyes gradually became cold. Looking at Xia Qingyun, he said coldly, I know that you were once a classmate of that person in the academy for a period of time. I also know how painful it is for you to see your former classmate climb to the peak of the world and leave you far behind. However, facing this situation, you can either work hard to improve your cultivation state or simply give up the idea of comparing with that person. Any other means will only make you more painful and meaningless. Don't think about using the sword to kill people. No, don't even think about using the sword of the sword Garrett to kill people. Qing Ziqing thought of the head in the ancient pond of the sword Garrett and his fellow disciples who were blind and had been practicing their swordsmanship in the dark room all day long. He said coldly, because the thing that the sword Garrett hates the most is letting others borrow our swords. He was talking about the former great divine priest of judgment of the West Hill Divine Palace, who lent Xiao Xiaoshu's sword to Lu Yiqing through an important figure buried in the sword Garrett by the Judicial Department, in an attempt to provoke a war between the sword Garrett and the Academy. The result of that incident was that Lu Yiqing was blinded by Ning Ke and was sent back to the sword Garrett after several months. The Sage of Sword, Lu Bai, drew a paper sword and lent it to Yi Hongyu. The former great divine priest of judgment was killed on the seat of heavenly black jade. Xia Qingyun only knew that the Sage of Swords' younger brother and Ning Ke had a shocking battle at the side gate of the academy, but he did not know the secret of the cultivation world behind this incident. He suddenly felt that Mr. Chang's eyes had become two sharpest swords. His eyes felt a sharp pain, and he lowered his head in fear and pain, not daring to say anything more. I ran as fast as I could and finally got home in the afternoon. Then I worked hard and finished the 3rd chapter today. This is the 1st chapter. There are 2 more chapters. Keep writing and try to finish the next chapter before 9:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 550. In the autumn rain, Ning Ke seemed to be praying devoutly, but in fact, he was coldly threatening the Buddha statue on top of the tile mountain. But he knew very well that the Buddha was long dead, and the one who could cure him was Master Qishan in the tile mountain. So the next day, he took Sang Sang to the tile mountain along the mountain path in the black horse carriage. The mountain path behind the temple was still quiet. The locust trees beside the path were still wet, and some traces of carriage wheels could be faintly seen on the smooth surface of the path. Ning Ke sat by the window and looked at the traces on the mountain path. He frowned slightly and thought that the Yulan Hungry Ghost Assembly would be held in front of the Lank Temple in a few days. Even if the diplomatic corps or the cultivation world wanted to discuss the desolate man's southward invasion or the underworld invasion in advance, they should be in the Lank Temple. Why were there so many horse carriages entering the Tile Mountain today? He naturally thought of the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom whom he had met in the Lank Temple yesterday morning. He had already guessed the identity of the nobleman at that time. Apart from the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, only the Crown Prince was able to have a knowing destiny state cultivator from the Sword Garrett accompanying him. But what did these people from the South Jin Kingdom want to do in Tile Mountain? Monk Guan Hai appeared under the big locust tree again. He put his palms together and bowed to the horse carriage. He smiled and said, "I thought senior brother 13 would arrive earlier." Ning Ke got off the carriage and returned the bow. He said casually, "Are there already many people here?" Guan Hai said, "Yes." Ning Ke asked, "I don't understand what this means." Guan Hai was slightly stunned. Only then did he realize that Ning Ke really did not know what it meant for his teacher to open the hut. He explained seriously. Every time Elder Qishan opened the hut, he would choose a fated person to answer the person's questions or help that person point in a certain direction in life. It was not rare for a Buddhism sect master to enlighten a follower. There were many such legends in the Yueluan kingdom. But in the eyes of the world, Master Qishan was not an ordinary Buddhism sect master. Moreover, decades ago, when he opened the hut to answer the fated person's questions, what he said was later proven to be a reality. This seemed to prove that Master Qishan could predict the future. This was even more magical than the great divine priest of revelation of the West Hill Divine Palace. It was even similar to the legendary Buddha's ability to grant all requests, which naturally made the world crazy. After the murder at the Lank Temple, Master Qishan had shut himself in his hut for many years, probably because he was heartbroken by the evil of his old friend, Lian Sheng, and also because of the blood in front of the temple. This year, it was rumored that the master would open his hut for a day, and it naturally became a grand event in the cultivation world. The cultivators and nobles who participated in the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival all chose to enter Hua Mountain without hesitation. They wanted to see if they were lucky enough to become the fated person in the master's eyes. Ning Ke did not know that the Lank Temple elder meant to be an elder of the temple. To say, it. Moon. Temple. Temple. Which mountain was? He. The temple. 2, but in Quebec was a temple was to say. Temple. The temple. 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 The temple. Temple of the temple. 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 Temple of temple. Temple. Is Ming. What happened? Ning Ke asked. Monk Guan Hai said, "A guest from afar. Senior brother Abbot used the bell to summon me to welcome him." Ning Ke said, "Then go quickly." Monk Guan Hai was very grateful. He sincerely apologized to Ning Ke, bowed to Sang Sang through the window, and left in a hurry. Looking at the back of the young monk drifting away on the mountain road, Ning Ke raised his eyebrows slightly and said nothing. He sat on the cushion in front of the carriage and kicked the big black horse lightly, saying, "Let's go." The big black horse was a little sleepy after playing with autumn grasshoppers in the temple last night. He woke up after being kicked by Ning Quebec. He braced himself and strode toward the depths of the Hua Mountain with his head held high. Sang Sang's worried voice came from the carriage. It must be a big shot. Someone who could make the Lank Temple ring the bells solemnly and make Monk Guan Hai go to the temple personally must have an extraordinary background. Ning Ke had long understood this. However, no matter how self-abased and self-pitying he was, he had to admit a fact with some narcissism, joy, and helplessness. There was no one in the world who had a more powerful background than him. To put it simply, no matter where the person who made the Lank Temple ring the bell came from, he could not be more powerful than him. Because of this, he was a little confused about the identity of the guests in front of the temple. Why would Monk Guan Hai accompany them instead of him, a disciple of the academy? He found it funny and confused when he heard Sang Sang's worry. Sang Sang had always been someone who did not care about such things. What was she worried about? Sang Sang said in a low voice, "When Master Qishan comes out of seclusion, he will only choose one fated person to answer his questions and puzzles. Today, so many people came to Hua Mountain, and there must be many bigwigs. I wonder if the master will choose me as the fated person to treat my illness." Ning Ke said with a smile, "It's enough that you are fated with me." Why would you be fated with an old monk who has lived for 100 years? As for the others, you don't have to worry about them. Sang Sang pushed open the front door of the horse carriage and looked at his side profile. She said, I'm just worried that it will be like when we were young, or when we entered the second floor of the academy. Young master, you will have to compete with many people. Who dares to compete with us? Even if there is a lunatic who is not afraid of death and wins against us, would the old monk dare not treat you? Not to mention that he once learned from the headmaster of the academy and has some old friendship with the academy. Even if he doesn't care about the old friendship, now we are both in the academy in the divine hall. With the Great Spirit and Haotian divine light in our chests and the headmaster's handwritten letter in our sleeves, we are really invincible. At that time, he can cure us even if he wants to. The horse carriage traveled on the quiet mountain road, and the sound of rolling over the slightly wet road was very soft. Ning Kei's disrespectful voice to Tile Mountain floated among the branches and leaves of the locust tree and the autumn tree, lingering for a long time. The mountain was flat, and the horse carriage traveled on the mountain road very easily. However, the distance between the two places had become slightly longer. The black horse carriage arrived at the jumping tiger stream when the morning fog dissipated and the autumn sun rose from the trees. The jumping tiger stream was a famous scenery of Tile Mountain in the past. However, over the years, as more and more old monks chose to live in seclusion here, the monks in the Lank Temple had tightened the management of the Tile Mountain. They would only open it for a period of time every year. Recently, it was naturally closed, so there were no tourists by the stream. No tourists did not mean that there were no visitors. There was a stone bridge over the jumping tiger stream. On the other side of the stone bridge was a dense autumn forest. On this side of the bridge was a huge stone platform. On the stone platform, there was a green tree with a huge crown. Under the green tree, there was a small stone table. There were already dozens of people gathered under the big tree. Some were standing, some were talking in low voices, and some were silent. Through the gaps in the crowd, one could vaguely see an old monk dressed in yellow robes playing chess with someone. The black horse carriage stopped a long distance away from the big green tree. Ning Kei looked from afar and sensed the strong and weak auras of those people. He confirmed that they were cultivators from many different cultivation sections. The people around the stone table under the big green tree were mostly focused on the chess game. Some of them surrounded a luxuriously dressed young man and were respectfully talking about something. It was the young man from the South Jin Kingdom that Ning Kei had met in the Lank Temple yesterday morning. Since Ning Kei had guessed his identity, he would not be surprised by this scene. However, he could not help but feel a little emotional when he thought of the ordinary cultivators who had no hope of achieving great Tao. They had cultivated for half their lives, but in the end, they still had to sell their skills to the royal family. When he saw the familiar figure of a young girl under a row of green bamboos dozens of feet away from the big green tree, he could not help but feel emotional from these cultivators back to himself. It was obvious that many cultivators tried to approach the young girl under the green bamboos, but did not dare to do so due to fear or other reasons. They only dared to greet her from afar. Therefore, the young girl only stood quietly under the row of green bamboos. She was as lonely and strong as the green bamboos. However, in Ning Kei's eyes, she was as fragile as the green bamboos. He had not seen her for more than a year, and she had lost a lot of weight. My mood is not calm, and my train of thought is affected. I can only write 2,500 words at this time. I am afraid that everyone will wait, so I update first. Then the next chapter will be more than 4,000 words. I will try to finish it before 1 o'clock. I am really King risking my life. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 551. Under the effect of the talisman array, the black horse carriage moved silently on the mountain road as if it was riding the wind. Many horses were grazing on the grassy slope beside the mountain stream, covering the sound of the big black horse's hooves. Dozens of cultivators under the big tree did not notice the arrival of Ning Ke and Sang Sang. But the girl under the bamboo wall noticed it. Having entered the knowing destiny state, she could clearly perceive the slightest change of the chi of heaven and earth around her. She was originally the most talented talisman master in the world. Now that she had entered the state of divine talisman master, how could she not notice the aura of talisman Taoism from the black horse carriage? Or was it because she had been silently looking at the direction of the mountain road, wanting to see someone? Looking at the black horse carriage that gradually stopped in the distance, the girl's eyes were filled with joy and slight confusion. Then she calmed down and slowly walked over there. Many cultivators on the plain by the stream had been silently paying attention to the girl this entire time, including that noble young master who was surrounded by many cultivators to curry favor. As the girl left the bamboo and walked towards the black carriage in the distance, their gazes subconsciously followed her, appearing rather perplexed. Some people were guessing who was in the black horse carriage that could make the world-famous calligraphy addict move to greet him. Some smart people or people who were more familiar with the Tang Empire had already guessed the truth and could not help but show a shocked expression. Ning Ke did not pay attention to the expressions and reactions of the cultivators under the big tree. He just silently watched the girl walking toward him. As she came closer and closer, he watched the face that he had not seen for a long time and rarely thought of but had not forgotten become clearer and clearer in his sight. He became more and more nervous. The girl had indeed lost a lot of weight, but she was still beautiful. Her eyes were as clear as an autumn lake, and her eyelashes were thin and sparse. Her lips were thin and bright, and her black hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall. Her white dress was like a white dandelion. As she moved, her simple and clean cloth shoes moved out of her dress from time to time and then floated back into her dress like leaves in the wind. It seemed as if nothing had changed from before. In the past year and a half, Ning Ke often received letters from the Great River Kingdom. The letters seemed to have the smell of ink, and were written in a graceful handwriting about daily affairs, never about love. After reading these letters, he would either give them to Sang Sang or throw them away. He would also write back, but he rarely wrote anything in the letters. Most of the time, he would just send some sections that he was satisfied with. Last year, when he decided to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival at the Lank Temple, Ning Ke had thought that the calligraphy addict would definitely be invited, and she might really come. He had thought many times about what it would be like when they met again, what she would say, and what he should say. However, the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. The more he thought about it, the more nervous and helpless he became. So he stopped thinking about it and forgot about it until he saw her reappear in front of him by the mountain stream. Ning Ke didn't know what to do as he looked at the girl who was slowly approaching him. He hoped that he could hear some sounds coming from the carriage behind him. He hoped that he could hear Sang Sang's fake coughs. Even if it was just the sound of her clothes moving, it would calm him down and make him look more indifferent. Mo Shanshan walked to the front of the carriage. The big black horse found that it was the beautiful mistress that it first recognized and liked. It shook its head and neighed, looking very happy. Mo Shanshan smiled and raised her hand to touch its head. The big black horse desperately tried to squeeze its huge head into her palm and rubbed it affectionately. It looked very funny. Ning Ke patted its back, silently warning it not to be too excited and nervous and lose its composure. At the same time, he also told himself not to be too excited and nervous and lose his composure. In the carriage, Sang Sang still did not make any sound. But at this time, he was much calmer. He looked at Mo Shanshan and bowed with hands folded in front. Mo Shanshan returned the bow and bowed to the black carriage. She said calmly, "Greetings, Lady of Light." Sang Sang's voice finally came from the carriage, "Greetings, Hill Master." The first words of the two girls were very calm and polite. Ning Ke could not help but be speechless when he heard Sang Sang's calm and gentle voice, which actually sounded like a bigwig from the West Hill Divine Palace. Just when he was at a loss of what to do, Sang Sang's voice came from the carriage again, "Young master, I'm a little tired." I want to rest in the carriage. Ning Ke understood that she was giving him a chance to talk to Mo Shanshan alone. After a moment of silence, he grunted and walked in front of Mo Shanshan. He said, "Let's take a walk by the stream." Looking at the back of the young man and woman walking to the mountain stream, the big black horse lightly kicked its hind hooves and snorted. It praised in its heart that they were really a beautiful couple. Of course, Sang Sang was also very good. But why didn't Ning Ke want both of them? If humans wanted women and needed to marry, then he should just marry both. Looking at this guy's current glory, who would dare to stop him? Back then, I already had a lover in the southern military camp. But when I saw that snow-white mare in the wilderness, I still did not flinch and wanted to have a go with her. Love really needs courage. Just when the big black horse kept mocking Ning Ke and felt pity for him and wanted to encourage him to have more courage, Sang Sang's question suddenly came from the carriage behind him. Sang Sang asked, "Are you familiar with Miss Shanshan?" The big black horse's body suddenly stiffened. He knew that Sang Sang had seen all the intimate scenes between him and Mo Shanshan. He could not help but feel terrified. As a big animal and pet of the Ning family from the old brush pen shop to the Yanming Lake, he knew better than anyone else in the world that in this family, the mistress would always be the most powerful. This had nothing to do with Sang Sang becoming the Lady of Light of the West Hill Divine Palace. After all, the world had already been operating like this when she was still a little handmaiden. Under such circumstances, the big black horse knew that any explanation he gave would be a cover-up and he would most likely die an ugly death. So he bared his teeth and looked at the horse carriage. He kept wagging his tail and tried his best to play dumb to please Sang Sang. On the grassy slope beside the mountain stream, there were many horses eating grass with their heads lowered. They should be the mounts of the cultivators who came to visit the mountain. Not far away, there were some wild goats playing. Both parties were silent and peaceful. Ning Ke and Mo Shanshan walked to the side of the stream and were also silent. However, the atmosphere was not as peaceful as on the grassy slope. Although nothing happened, it was really difficult for them to live in peace. There was an awkward and uneasy atmosphere. The silence had to be broken. If Mo Shanshan still needed to take the first step, eldest brother of the academy would probably mock him for many years if he knew about it, no matter how gentle he was. That was indeed not manly. So Ning Ke looked at her and asked, "How have you been in the past year?" The two of them had been communicating through letters for the past year and a half. Even if they were talking about trivial matters, they would also talk about recent events. There was no need for him to ask specifically. After such a long silence and such a serious tone, he ended up asking such a question. This could only mean that his brain was still not working well at this time. I broke through the realm in calligraphy cultivation. Mo Shanshan did not laugh or feel annoyed. She answered calmly and seriously. As she spoke, the serious expression on her face and the focused gaze in her eyes gave this simple question and answer a sense of ritual. Then she smiled and asked, "What about you? You rarely mentioned it in your letters." "So did I. I broke through the realm in calligraphy cultivation." After a short pause, Ning Ke smiled bitterly and said, "I killed a few people along the way." Hearing this, Mo Shanshan looked into his eyes seriously and confirmed that her previous perception was not wrong. She said joyfully, "When did you break through the realm? That's really worth congratulating." Ning Ke looked at her and said with a smile, "You became a divine talisman master in spring. I did it much later than you. What's there to be happy about? Now that I think about it, the letter you left when you left Chang, and was really prophetic. When you saw the more magnificent rivers and mountains, I was still struggling to climb in the mountain stream." Mo Shanshan smiled and said, "But now you have seen the scenery at the top of the mountain." "Well, the scenery here is not bad." Ning Ke moved his gaze from the bottomless mountain stream by the cliff to the peaks of Hua Mountain. Mo Shanshan suddenly thought of the thing that worried her the most after they parted. She asked, "I was really shocked to know that you were going to duel with Xiaohe. At that time, no one in the Great River Kingdom, including the headmaster, was optimistic about you. Ning Ke looked into her beautiful eyes and asked, "What about you?" Mo Shanshan thought for a while and said, "Although there is really no reason to think that you will win, I don't know why I always feel that even if you lose, you will be fine. At least you will not die." Ning Ke was slightly curious and asked, "You actually have so much confidence in me?" Mo Shanshan smiled and said, "That year when we left the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, Yi Hong Yu once told me in the hanging basket that a shameless person like you usually has a long life. Was this the saying that a scourge could live for 1,000 years? Ning Ke was a little annoyed and said, "I don't like to hear such slander. Although she is now the great divine priest of judgment, if she really pushed me, I would dare to find trouble with her." Mo Shanshan did not mention this matter anymore and asked, "How does it feel to defeat Xiao?" "The feeling of defeating the enemy is not important. Even if I can't beat the enemy, it's fine as long as I can kill the enemy. So you should ask me, how does it feel to kill Xiao?" Just like on the journey in the wilderness, Ning Ke began to instill the cold-blooded and realistic fighting methods and ideas into her habitually. He said, "There was a moment of ecstasy, then exhaustion and confusion, and finally, it all returned to the peace after getting what I wanted." Mo Shanshan listened to him silently. Looking at the extremely faint scar on his face and the extremely shallow dimple, she was a little absent-minded. Thinking of the fierce battle on the winter lake in the rumors, she always felt that there were many things hidden under his calm expression that made her heart palpitate. She even felt that his dimple was filled with fresh blood, and she could not help but feel a little sad. "When this matter really spread to the Great River Kingdom, I didn't know that you had such a miserable childhood," she said with a slightly trembling voice, unable to hide her love for him. Ning Ke did not want to talk about this topic. Looking at her cheeks that were slightly thinner than before, he joked, "The flesh on your face is all gone. It seems that you have had a hard time in the past 2 years." He had originally wanted to make a joke to dilute the previous depressed atmosphere, but as soon as he said it, he knew that it was wrong. As the world's calligraphy addict, she was loved by the master of calligrapher and respected by her peers. She broke through the knowing destiny state in spring and became an extremely rare young divine talisman master. Her life could be said to be extremely smooth and happy. What else could make her worry and become haggard other than love? If it was an ordinary woman, upon hearing these words, even if she didn't immediately burst into tears, she would at least reveal a sorrowful expression. At the very least, she would force a smile with a hint of reluctance, which would make the man feel guilty. Mo Shanshan was not an ordinary woman, so she just smiled and said nothing. Ning Ke looked at her gratefully and said, "I thought that the Lank Temple would definitely invite you to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, but the envoys of various countries are discussing the desolate man's southward journey. Other cultivators may be worried about the rumor of the underworld invasion. According to your temperament, you should not come. Do you want Elder Qishan to guide you? But you are now a divine talisman master who knows the knowing destiny state. You should know your own destiny. Why do you need someone to help you?" As soon as he said this, he immediately knew that he had made a big mistake. The calligraphy addict naturally did not need Elder Qishan to help her with questions about cultivation or talisman Taoism. She did not even need to ask about life. So naturally, she asked. No matter how great Mo Shanshan was, she was still a girl. After hearing these 2 questions from Ning Ke, she could not help but feel a little embarrassed and annoyed. She looked at him and asked, "Then why are you here? Do you want to steal the Buddhist scriptures of the Lank Temple?" Ning Ke knew that he had made a mistake, so he did not dare to mock her back. He said honestly, "The Academy always needs people to show respect to the grand meeting of the cultivation world. I represent the Academy to enter the human realm, so I have to come." Then he looked a little sad and said, "More importantly, my Sungsung's illness has acted up again. This time, even the teacher can't do anything about it. But the teacher said that the Lank Temple can cure it, so I brought her here." During the journey in the wilderness, especially during the time when they continued to the north, Mo Shanshan and Ning Ke had been traveling together. Naturally, they talked about a lot of people and things around them. She talked about her fellow disciples in the Black Ink Garden, while Ning Ke talked about his fellow disciples in the academy and his comrades in the city of Wei. But most of the time, he talked about his little handmaiden at home. Naturally, he also talked about their childhood and the little handmaiden's old illness. Mo Shanshan had heard the words "my sang sang" countless times from Ning Quebec. She had also read the chicken soup calligraphy, so she knew how important sang sang was to him even before Ning Ke himself. So even though she had only met sang sang twice and had not spoken more than 10 sentences, she was actually very familiar with sang sang. She even felt a sense of closeness to sang sang, except for a certain person and some things. Hearing that sang sang was seriously ill, she looked at the black horse carriage not far away and was very worried. But she did not say anything. Ning Ke could see that her worry was sincere. He felt a warmth in his heart and then a sense of guilt. He was capable but not virtuous, but he could be loved by such a beautiful and kind woman. What a ridiculous thing. What's going on over there? He looked at the crowd under the big tree and pointed at the stone chess and the yellow-robed old monk who was playing chess. Mo Shanshan did not expect that he would not know the rules of the cultivation world for many years even though he had already entered the Tile Mountain. She explained, being able to get an answer from Master Qishan is something that cultivators look forward to the most. So every time the master comes out of the hut, many cultivators, especially those who are not from the wild, will come to the Tile Mountain. After all, this is a quiet place for Buddhism. It can't become as noisy as a market. Moreover, the master can't choose a fated person from thousands of people. So, since many years ago, the Lang Temple has set a rule that only cultivators who pass the 3 chess games will be qualified to be chosen by Master Qishan before they reach the cave. Ning Ke looked at the big tree and frowned. For example, we have to win against that old monk to cross the bridge? Mo Shanshan nodded and said, sitting and talking in the Tile Mountain is a very famous event in the cultivation world. It is said that one of the 3 chess games is an incomplete game, one is a real game, and the last is a temporary game. Ning Ke asked, do we have to win 3 games in a row to reach the hut? Mo Shanshan said, the last time Master Qishan opened the hut to choose a fated person was decades ago. I am not very clear about the details, but the master is an eminent monk of the Buddhism sect. I think he will not just decide based on winning or losing. If the visitor can show his wisdom or other meaningful qualities during the game, he will be chosen by the master. But the 3 games must be played. Ning Ke asked, why? Mo Shanshan did not explain. Because it is a rule. Ning Ke shook his head and said, rules are dead, but people are alive. He said it seriously, but Mo Shanshan laughed and said, you can't play chess? Ning Ke was a little embarrassed and said, I am willing to fight with swords. I don't like to waste my energy on chess. Mo Shanshan said with a little worry, then what will you do? Ning Ke said with a smile, what else can I do? No one will dare to stop me. But, if these monks are really stupid enough to go against the academy, you have to help me. Mo Shanshan looked at his playful appearance. This time, she finally saw the hidden determination and ruthlessness in his eyes. She couldn't help but feel a little sour in her heart. Then, it softened. She knew that since this matter was related to Sang Sang's life, no matter what difficulties and obstacles there were, even if it was Haotian in front of him, Ning Ke would cut through them. This really made her very jealous. She really liked this. It is a little late, but I wrote a lot more in this chapter. It is almost 5,000 words. Ha ha ha. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.